And we are live. Hey everyone, Matt Landfair here with primary and secondary. This is ModCast. This is ModCast number 87. We haven't done one of these since, wow, it's been since last year. Yeah, have a really cool panel. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. Primarily, we're going to be talking about plateaus in learning, plateaus in training, and basically hitting walls in your personal training and try to overcome that. It's interesting hearing from people talking about primary and secondary, specifically the Facebook groups and the forum, and how they feel, it's changed. It's not as good as it used to be. We're going to get into that because there's some cool stuff going on. I guess we can start with some intros. But my background's in law enforcement, some video games, a lot of video editing. That's pretty much it. Steve Fisher.
How are you, sir?
Good. I'm gonna crank up your audio just a little bit. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Steve Fisher. I've been started my career shooting a million years ago, like most everybody else. Went to the law enforcement community, became a full-time instructor, and it's just been downhill ever since.
Yeah, and it's cool because you've been around for a while. You also were a close friend of Pat's. Yeah. He was very influential, and he's his influence is also going to be part of our discussion here. Rick.
Hey guys, Rick Labistre. Currently sniper section leader of Light Infantry Battalion. Been in the Army, National Guard here for about almost 15 years now. Couple deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, 11 Bravo by trade. Coming over here as primary secondary just to give as much as I can and see if I can learn something myself too.
Hanging out.
Hanging out.
Hanging out. Justin.
Justin Smith. I am a narcotics supervisor in my primary job. 15 years law enforcement. I'm also a team leader for a 30-man part-time team in the Southeast major metropolitan area. And I'm an instructor.
And you are an instructor.
Yeah, that too.
And finally, Mike.
Yeah, Mike Hueser. Worked with Pat for a very long time. Consult with some people and generally study and advise on human performance and how people learn things, cognitive learning skills. So hopefully I can contribute a little bit.
And with that in mind, when I sent out the link for guys to jump on and you jumped on, it was like, oh, this is the perfect guy. I'm glad you were available, because the many conversations we've had, you're a perfect panelist for this. And you have good taste in food, so there's that. So basically, the main theme is plateaus in learning, plateaus in training, in law enforcement. Law enforcement, there are a lot of plateaus. There's only so much you can do go through the department, and then you have to do things on your own. But really talking about the processes, the learning, and the absorption when it comes to going to classes. It seems a lot of people go to the exact same instructor time after time after time, go through the same class time after time after time, and expect to get these brand new epiphanies, these new concepts, these explosions of learning. It's not necessarily going to be the case. You ultimately may run into some diminishing returns. Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting thought. Like many of us who started our training history, we were very limited in the 90s by who we could go and train with or what was available to us, and it wasn't necessarily bad. Hitting that wall is kind of interesting. Most students that I've seen over the years that I kind of understand, and Mike's the same way, they end up in this virgin love, we'll call it. They get in with their first instructor, or they feel comfortable with an instructor, and they want to stay with that instructor and keep repeating the same programs over and over and over again. Actually, I've had to tell students before, and still do every class. It's like, literally, dude, you need to open up your horizons. You need to open up your windows. Even though as an instructor, I'm continually learning, continually trying to educate myself. Like my latest quest has been like vision processing to help with those things. Working with some guys that I shoot with here locally that are future, like eye care research study dudes. It's really been kind of a eye opener for me, literally. But dudes need to get out more and expand those horizons. They'll only reach a certain level with the same instructor. A lot of quote unquote instructors versus teachers have that same program, that same database, that same bullet point. It's very institutionalized, inbred of training. That's just, they're comfortable with the program they're teaching. They're not really evolving their programs to today's current threat assessments that are going on and what the needs are of the students, either be it, the average citizen, law enforcement, whatever the case is. But too many dudes just get stuck or comfortable wanting to touch the magic, so to speak. And they're hurting themselves. They're not seeking out new information and vital or critical information.
I really appreciate the fact that you associated this with love, because I see that. I definitely see that. You get this first taste and wow, this is the best thing ever. And I wouldn't say it's like a drug, but I'd say, yeah, getting that first overwhelming epiphany, the change in your a huge paradigm shift, and to figure out, oh, this is how things really work. And then it takes so much more information to get that, and you probably will never get that again. But it's continual.
It is. It really does evolve, and it's interesting for me to see how the training industry community has changed over the years. But the funny thing is, I can go to almost any class that I go and take, and I will run into somebody that I know or have taught or taken classes with, and it's the same people in the same very small circle.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting kind of like factoid. Like to me, like I first met Mike back in 2000, early 2000s with PACT. People have missed out a lot over the years with Mike. Honestly, he is one of the most eye-opening dudes that I have ever learned from, and actually had the ability to actually be on the line with as an instructor for some classes. I learned an amazing amount of knowledge from that man. It's just unbelievable. And it's funny because I've gone to, all the big names, all the big places, but man, the shit I learned from even Mike just in the early to mid 2000s was just mind blowing to me. And it was the simplest little things that I had often overlooked, which really also helped me as an instructor to kind of replay that tape and present information differently to some students. It's the little nuggets that people miss by staying in the same place all the time.
Mike?
Thanks, Steve. I'll give you your $5 next time I see you. So first thing as a student you need to identify is, what are your goals, right? Why are you going to class? Some people just want to acquire some basic some fundamental skills with the tool that they have in their hand, and they really don't want to go beyond that. And you see a lot of students that show up year after year at the same range, at the same time of year with the same instructor, because it's like going on a fishing trip with their buds or golfing or whatever. It's a way to get away from the stresses of life, and that's all they want out of it. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad they're out there. All the other instructors are glad they're out there because it's a constant stream of income for them, because these are students that they're familiar with. They know where those students are in their skill sets, and they know what kind of problem children they're going to be or they're not going to be. So you have that kind of a student, and their goals are different than somebody like Justin or Steve or you or me or some of the other people that we deal with, who are constantly trying to evolve their understanding of fundamentals and the layering of different fundamentals. I stress this every time I deal with people. There's no such thing as an advanced skill. There's an accomplished fundamental. So the professional student, the person seeking to raise their level, has a different goal in mind. And as instructors, You have to understand the difference between those two groups of people, those that do it kind of as recreation or just as acquiring enough to do what they think they need to do, and those that are serious about their profession, who are trying to really raise their level to a pretty accomplished mindset and skill qualification. So goal is the first thing. So what is your goal as a student? What do I want to do? And the second thing that they have to consider is the process. And the process is tied to the goal in some ways, but it's also separate from the goal in other ways. And so let me give you an example. You want to make a perfect apple pie. Let's make this outside of shooting so we can understand the cognitive concepts. You want to make a perfect apple pie, and you look at a recipe from a famous chef, and you follow that recipe, and you make the first iteration, you make an apple pie. It's okay because you followed the recipe, but it's not exceptional. The more times you do that, the more times you make that apple pie, the more times you do good repetitions, you're driving the process towards the goal. So the goal is always important. It's the standard that you're reaching, but it's the process that allows you to reach for the goal. And we've always, a lot of us or most of us have stressed in class, it's not, let me rephrase it a different way. I'll sit in a classroom and I'll ask people, what does practice make? And what do most people say? Perfect. Correct? Don't we all agree with that? You ask people, What does practice make? They say fucking perfect, right? That's wrong. Practice makes permanent. Okay, perfect practice makes perfect. We know that perfection is not achievable, but working on the process toward perfection is something that anybody can do. So if I have somebody that is focusing on the process rather than the goal, and they focus on good repetitions, they will go down that pathway towards the goal faster. Their learning curve shallows out much more quickly than somebody that just focuses on the end state. The end state is the metric, but it's the process between where you start and where you want to reach the end state is what makes you a better shooter or a better person that makes a pie. So you have to have a goal as a student. What kind of student do you want to be? What are you trying to acquire? And then you have to understand the concepts of process. Unfortunately, a lot of instructors and most students specifically, do not understand that the process is everything. And you were mentioning earlier, Steve and Matt, you have people that go to the same instructor all the time, and they don't get outside their comfort zone. They're people that don't empty their teacup, right? If I go to Steve Fisher all the time, or I go to, if I go to Mike Pannone, or I go to Pat McNamara, or any of the other well-known instructors, and those are the only people I study under, I'm going to miss other things because my teacup is full of their training doctrine and their ideology and philosophy. And you miss things like Fisher was saying earlier. There are subtleties that you can't pick up on if you go to the same person because you know what the POI is going to be. On training day 2, right before lunch, this is the drill you're going to do. And you kind of tune out because you're not getting a stressor. The stressors are what make you think and grow. So if people don't empty their teacup, or you could look at it another way, all they drink is tea and they never pour their teacup out and drink coffee. Right? So Fisher is tea and I'm coffee. You go to Fisher all the time, all you know is tea. There's an advantage to drinking coffee also. There's a delight in drinking coffee. So you want to come to me for something, or you want to go to Shockey or Pat McNamara or Mike Pannone or any of these other people. So it's goal first and process second. And if you understand how the process works, which we'll get into later, that has to do with cognitive development, then you can flatten your learning curve out pretty considerably and kind of compress your skill acquisition. So I hope that kind of clarifies some points or illustrates some points. If not, speak up.
Yeah, that's good stuff. As per the norm. Justin, what has your experience been with this? I know where you're located, you have a lot of training opportunities.
All right, so I'm going to piggyback off of Frank there. Okay, so with him talking about like the pie. So we're sitting here looking, so I get a recipe from a world-class chef and I cook it and say, I'm sitting here cooking this pie and I'm like, man, this is freaking delicious. I cook a world-class pie, but I haven't gotten to eat that world-class chef's pie. And I think that's part of it is you need to meet, if language is okay, Matt, you got to meet that motherfucker, the one that shows you that you think your pie is good, man, but this is where it's at. And then let them sit and show you and break it down. Okay, so I wrote it down on a piece of paper for you, and that's how you do it. But let me show you the nuances of this and how this actually comes together and how this works. And once you get to that point, you just have to meet that motherfucker, the one that can show you that you really don't have it down as much as you think you do. So in my region, like we talked about earlier, Matt, it's, we've got a couple of, again, echo Frank, a couple of different teacups that we're drinking out of, but it's a regional thing. And I think from a whole entire team, we're all really searching for that other cup to drink out of. It's, we spent years with these guys and we've kind of achieved the levels that we can achieve with these folks. And each one of them, I think everybody we train with, Rich, everybody on here knows Rich Mason. He'll sit down with you and he's a very humble man. He'll tell you first off, I'm not the end all be all. I think the guy has the market cornered on dynamic CQB. And I think everybody will agree with me on that. But there's places where he's lacking and he'll tell you that. He's not a cop. He doesn't do the things we do every day on a daily basis, but he can prepare you for the Super Bowl. And he's definitely a crutch for us on the dynamic side of things, but we're in this big search for information from outside sources, and we're just keep waiting to run into that guy. Unfortunately, we have to reach for it personally, like you were talking about earlier. We have to reach for it personally because agency wise, it's just not going to happen with the resources we have here.
Speaking of which, Rick, with the environment you're in, military, very specialized, how does all this work for you guys?
Well, the plateau thing, I think, is something that just, from my background in the Army, in the infantry, guys tend to think that, hey, we're infantrymen. We're the ultimate badasses and all that is gunfighting, because this is something that you don't go to some, a 2-day class to learn how to, small unit tactics and stuff like this that everybody thinks that, they have down pat because they went to, Fort Benning, graduated basic training, and now they're a qualified infantryman. And the fact of the matter is that this stuff is, is very basic stuff. And the individual soldier is not, unfortunately, the focus of so much of this training potential. You look at how units are graded, how they're evaluated in their training, their collective tasks, basically. So you're looking at a unit that can accomplish a certain battle drill. We'll say battle drill 1 alpha, squad attack. So the squad receives contact, they get down, they react to contact, they send one team to maneuver, to close with and, destroy the enemy, et cetera, and all these other different steps. But the individual soldier is not necessarily the guy that goes to these advanced classes and they don't run him through drills. They don't put him on a timer. They don't push his individual skills. They don't look at these things as an institution to teach him how he can push his individual skills to the next level. If you find guys that are doing that, they either usually got it from the outside, they're through competition, or maybe they have a law enforcement background, or they're on the special operations side of the house, which is not exempt from some of this stuff, but they're much further along than the regular side of the house. So for me personally, I didn't really start really pushing myself and learning until I started getting into the competition stuff in the military side of the house, and then that opened up a whole new ball game. It's like, whoa, we're running some of these drills that are pretty common, but in the military they're really not. Running my times against a timer. I'm like, shit, I had never done that before in the military. I mean, we don't do that stuff. It's you put 2 rounds in a 20-inch by 40-inch full-size E-type target. The thing goes down. Cool. That's considered success. Well, yeah, that's great, but for the individual, it doesn't really set him up to be able to understand that his limitations or the limitations that he has are something that he can push, and you really need to seek outside training for that. And so that's in the Joe Schmuckatelli line company, and how does that translate into my specialty task, which is in a sniper section? Is kind of the same thing. We have a basic course in the Army. Everybody that passes the Army sniper school, that, a lot of people think that's the be all end all of sniping, but really that's a basic course. I mean, you're just opening the door to a whole new world. So seeking further training outside of that, it applies just the same as in anything else. You need to diversify. You need to look at other instructors, different, backgrounds of stuff. Like I went to a law enforcement sniper course, and it was great because it was just a different perspective on some of the things that we could reinforce and knew how to do, and other things that we just, had never learned to do in that context. So I'm totally, agree with what everything is said about, diversifying your training. And even if it's something, I would tell guys that, like, even if it's something that doesn't necessarily apply to what they do right now, doesn't mean it won't always. And just because, hey, this might be a 2-day carving course, and you're a, seasoned soldier, you might have been carrying an M4 for, the last decade or whatever. That doesn't mean you're not going to learn something. I mean, and even if it's not a, mind-blowing epiphany type thing, dude, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Take what you can and apply it to your job. And then not only that, but you're also bringing that knowledge to whatever organization you belong to. So now you're spreading that knowledge. Now you're encouraging guys to, push their limits. And that's kind of what I try to do with my guys, and just, even if I'm not the one that's teaching it, at least be a conduit. Hey, this is where you can, get better at. Here's some things that I picked up. I mean, I'm damn sure not the best at any of it, but here's some ways that you can take your training to the next level. So plateau is something that we are constantly fighting in the military. It's just, stagnation of skills, because, as much as everybody likes to think that we are putting rounds down range every day and doing all kinds of cool stuff, the fact of the matter is we're not. And, plateauing, stagnation, that's a very real thing.
I really also like what you said about going to somewhere just for a different perspective, because that additional perspective provides so much. After working for a few police departments and getting used to the rhythm of their firearms training, and then go to somewhere else or go to a different police department for a joint training event and seeing how they do it. It's like, wow, this is really cool. This is good stuff. Same for going to a new instructor. I remember attending, let's see here. I went through Pat's class a bunch of times. I went through a Pat Mac, and then I went to Darcy. And each of the different instructors provided a different aspect, different perspective that really it widened my overall view of everything, and it helped my overall growth. So, Steve, he's asleep. Oh, there you are.
Here, I'm here.
So, going to a law enforcement aspect real fast. Mm-hmm. What are things that we can do as instructors to help encourage officers to pursue additional instruction, pursue additional points of view, perspectives?
As well as I do, and a lot of the rest of the guys here, the problem is you deal with the fact that, one, cops are cheap. it's hard to push dudes outside of their yearly or, bi-yearly quals. They feel that those quals are enough. I think the problem with that is changing administrative views. And that's always the hard part, dealing with the politicians or the administration and the budgets. The other thing is, myself having of late been able to pull in some of the firearms training unit guys are going to a couple of agencies this past year and this upcoming year to actually do train the trainer programs, has been what I would call beneficial. And honestly, I think the easiest way to really do it is to get in touch with those guys either through, the national conferences, get with their firearms training unit dudes that are there and get into a train the trainer program for them to give them those just different perspectives, those different views to pass it along. The other thing is to get that we have found recently is to get some of the SWAT guys, get the SRT dudes, the guys that are getting the additional training, and feed that down to the patrol people. I recently, this past year, did a 7-day block, 5-day block for a local SWAT team whose last outside training influence was 5 years previous because of their budget. I literally ate that class for free for 5 days with those guys because they needed it, they wanted to be there. Those are the kind of dudes I liked working with. And I told them, I said, here's the conditions though. You have to bring at least 2 senior patrol guys with you to this class. They kind of thought I was strange for a minute. They're like, well, why? This is team training. I said, here's the problem. I said, you need to get this information that you guys are getting passed down to patrol level. Patrol level guys are most likely the first guys that will be there. And they thought about it and they went, oh yeah. So they grabbed, 2 of their senior patrol guys that were kind of, squared away, good shooters, proficient dudes, and who are also guys responsible for taking care of some in-service training for their guys. It's such a hard dynamic to fight because you're fighting the administration, you're fighting the dudes with 20 years as the firearms training unit dudes who are still teaching thumb over revolver crush grip shit and qualification courses. I don't know if there's an absolute way to get it to happen. I have not found the answer to it yet or the solution of how to do that.
And with that in mind, well, you and I both know we've been doing this long enough, Justin as well. There are those officers that have absolutely no desire to. And so.
Oh, absolutely. And those are legitimately, I had that this past year. Well, I was working at a PD range doing some open enrollment classes, and I have, slots set aside for officers from that agency. It was very tough to get dudes to come and take the class for free. Ammo was paid, time was free, everything was free to them. All they had to do was show up and shoot the class. And the guys that did show up were just there to shoot and bullshit and do whatever, and they weren't really taking it as serious as they should. And when they got their asses handed to them in some of the quals and some of the drills and exercises that I do, by just some, gun-carrying average citizen, they're like, well, wait a minute. Well, hey, dude, guess what? You could have actually paid attention, listened, and did things and, got involved in the conversations instead of being that attitude of, yeah, I know this. I've been a cop for 15 years.
That's what I was talking about, meeting that motherfucker, Steve. It's that finding somebody out there who shows you that they're better than you.
Yeah.
And then it's on you at that point to figure it out. Hey, how are you better than me? And how can we fix this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just limited to cops. Soldiers, the same way.
Yeah. And the funny thing was literally like when we were turning in, some score sheets and stuff like that, because the agency wanted proof that those guys were there. And they're like, hey, wait a minute. I was like, hey, wait a minute. You know what? Your guys didn't want to perform. They didn't want to do what was being asked of them. And that's not my problem. I said, like Mike knows, it's the rule of 100. We can tell them 100 times. We can show them 100 times. 101st won't make a difference. And yeah. And these guys literally are the dudes that I have no desire to teach. I do not want them there. They're detrimental to the rest of the learning curve for the group and the class, and they're wasting my oxygen. And to be brutally fucking honest about it, they don't want to be there, then I don't give a shit. Unfortunately, that's the attitude that I have to take, because I may have 18 other dudes that want to be there, that want to learn. that want to absorb that information. But getting back to it, outside influences coming into non-progressive agencies has always been a problem. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to seek it out. And, that's on them until it becomes a reactive instead of proactive. So.
Yeah. And yeah, ultimately it's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. It's a waste of ammo, especially if we can cut a line from 18 to 12. That's that much better. The instructions is going to get that much better because we don't have to deal with that other 6 that don't want to be there.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, even this year I've decided personally that, you know what, I've knocked down my class sizes considerably based on the classes that are going on. And I'm just going to start driving more and more to the people that really want to truly be there. The days of you take my time at Magpul. The time frame I was there for 4 odd years, working at, it was not uncommon to have 30 dudes in a class. It used to drive me nuts, with 2 instructors, maybe 3, depending on who was on with us at time. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And then you'd had one instructor on the line actually shooting the course with the students. I'm like, oh, I get this. This is not good. And when I changed that program, and then my partner had came on with me, my other guy, it was good because we were actually knocking it down, doing certain things. But man, it's literally to a point where, like you said, I'd rather have those 12 dudes that want to be there and learn than 30 dudes that are there for an experience and just to shoot the shit and have fun and be patted on the back and make them feel good about themselves. Guys that have been through the program with me know I don't care if you feel good about yourself. I don't give 2 shits. I'm here to make you better. And if that means you feel bad, that's good. I want to expose your weaknesses and give you obtainable goals that can be reached.
And overall, the classes are so much better when we eliminate those that don't want to be there to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Shockey.
His system isn't working, so that's why he's not officially joining us.
All right. So kind of to piggyback off what Steve's saying, you get people that, again, I'll go back to goal and process. Why are these cops or civilians showing up to a class? Let's deal with law enforcement because that's the topic at hand. Why are people in law enforcement going to these classes outside their agency? They read something in a magazine, word of mouth. They saw something on a former group, and they're like, this might be interesting. The people that have that attitude are kind of self-starters. They're the ones that, they give up 1 can of Skol a day and don't go to Starbucks and, square away their pennies to save money to go to a class because they are self-starters. They're seeking a better level of education. They want to do it on their own. Their goal and their process is different than somebody that's told by an agency or a department, you're going to this class. You're going to go take, Sentinel Concepts, basic carbine class because you need to work on your carbine skills. And these guys, not all of them, but a lot of them, they go to the class and like Steve was saying, they fart around. They check the box. They showed up. They shoot the drills. They shoot the quals. They get their certificate and they show it to their boss. Hey, I did that. But their goal is different and their process is different. And a lot of that comes down to, as Steve was saying, administration ignorance and institutional inertia. I'll give you an example. I was asked to help a SWAT team. And I think I've told this story before, but I'm going to retell it. They were so used to the POI and the rhythm of how the class worked that they were gaming the class. They were gaming the entire process. The goal was to finish the class. The process was completely ignored because they knew what the process was going to be. So I was asked to come out and do something different. So give me your POI so I can see what the fuck you're doing. And I'm like, okay, you guys, I know where these guys are going to game this. So I wrote a completely different POI that covered the same topics and fundamentals. And I threw them a curveball. And a lot of them struggled with it. Now, again, let's talk. We're going back to the two different types of students for law enforcement. So I said, hey, here's the deal. I'll do it on this date. Just cover my expenses. I'll do it for free. But I don't want to have to deal with any administrative bullshit. You tell them when to be there, what their loadout is, what kit they need, what ammo allotment, all that kind of crap. I'll just show up and run the class. And the training officer was like, okay, cool. So I start getting these fucking messages a couple months out. Hey, I can't make it. I got, my kid's got a soccer game, or, I can't do this, or I'm not sure about this. I'm like, don't fucking bother me with this shit. Talk to your training officer. And I contacted the training officer and said, hey, no more of that bullshit. I'm just going to run the class. I don't want to handle the administrative bullshit. So I kept getting these things, and I just rigmarole kept going back and forth, and it kind of disappeared after a while. And about 2 weeks out, I got a different set of questions. Hey, man, I know you're doing this thing, and we're all on board with it. If we get there early, can we shoot early? Now, that's a different group of students. The first group didn't want to be there, but they had to go because they were told to, and it was required. The second set of cats were like, hey, if we get there early, can we shoot early? Different mentality. And your mentality as a student helps drive the process toward your goal. So I'm like, yeah, if you guys want to get there early, you can shoot early. Okay, well, how early will you get there? I'm like, how early can you shoot? They're like, as soon as the sun comes up. I'm like, all right, I'll be there, at the gate, bring me fucking coffee and donuts, and we'll go to work. These dudes got out there, set up the entire range. I got my coffee and donuts. I ran through the first 2 training evolutions in the POI before anybody else showed up. The second group, the lollygaggers, were like, it's cold and rainy. Can we sit in the patrol car or the classroom when we're not on the line? Fuck no, you can't. These guys have been out here since dark, and they've been shooting. I have to be on the line the entire time. You can't sit in the fucking patrol car or in the classroom. Get your ass out here and learn some shit. So you have 2 different mentalities going on in the same class. You have the people that want to be there. They're striving for excellence. And you have the people that are there because it's required. And that flows directly from the 2 problems that Steve was talking about: administrative ignorance and partly what I was talking about, institutional inertia. We've always done it this way. Those guys, them, they. That's how we've always done it. I fucking hate that they, them, those guys bullshit. Expand your horizons. So the guys that were out there early, if they'd wanted to shoot, and they jumped on the line when other guys weren't on the line, they jumped on a slot. They're like, hey, can I shoot? Yeah, you got free ammo. Fucking get to work. Who do you think walked away with the most instruction from the class? The guys that wanted to be there. The ones that had to be there and they didn't really want to be there walked away with something different than what they had from their original POI, but they didn't walk away with as much as the guys that wanted to be there. So a lot of this in law enforcement, and Rick was saying in the military, it's required. I'm going to show up, do the bare minimum. It's part of my job requirement, but I'm not going to make any outstanding efforts to become a better person for my job. So that's part of what we face as instructors, and what students face, and that's on their own. That's on their own. That's their problem. They can choose to save pennies and find a better level by going outside, or if it's an in-service thing, working harder. Or you can be the other type of student who just, hey, I got to show up today, these 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. I got 8 hours a day. When I'm done, I can go out and drink beers with my buds. I'm not going to be reflective and contemplate what I've learned or apply any of that to when I get back on the street. I did what I was asked to do. The first group of guys I was talking about, the ones that showed up early and set up all the steel and the targetry and fucking set up the range and shit. And the cool thing about the guys that do it early and show up and do an effort is that, as Steve was saying, that trickles down to everybody else because they paid attention, they worked hard. And that was the process. They weren't looking at the goal, I got to finish the class. The process for the first group of guys was, I want to learn something and be a better shooter. I want to be a better cop. So part of it is institutional and part of it is on the student themselves. Anyway.
Yeah. And it's so much, and again, it's so much better when you're around that first group. So much more is accomplished. They all reinforce each other. Everything's better. So with that in mind, all you people listening, Put forth some effort. Bunch of slackers. Right, Justin?
Yeah, it says something, man, when somebody's out there ready to work. It really does. He's nailing it.
Well, let's not forget it's not just the student, it's the instructor, right? The instructor has to put effort in. I mean, Pat had a rule of 100, and Steve mentioned it earlier. If you're not going to listen to me, after the 100th explanation or correction, you're never going to fucking put the effort in the process to realize your goal. You're not going to do the work.
Yeah, it's training triage. That Rich actually coined that, but it's training triage is what it's called, man. It's just at some point you have to not necessarily write them off. You're going to give them the same shit that everybody else is getting, but they're not somebody that you're going to focus on. They're not going to be a focal point in your course while they're failing because they haven't listened or they haven't paid attention. They haven't put forth any effort into your course.
Exactly. So that, and Steve knows me pretty well, and so does Matt, but, sometimes it's the student's willing to learn, but sometimes the teaching style of the instructor clashes with how that student learns.
Yes. So that's where multiple instructors comes in.
Exactly. So when Pat and I were tag teaming classes, sometimes Pat would saunter over to me and, whistling through his teeth would say, "Hey brother, unfuck number 6. Because he couldn't reach that guy. And I'd go over there because I have a different teaching approach and say, "Hey, bro, what's going on?" "Well, I'm still shooting low left." "Well, let me watch you shoot and watch how you're shooting." "Well, Pat said this. We'll look at it from this perspective instead." So sometimes it's not necessarily that the student doesn't want to learn or can't learn. It's the approach from the instructor. So as instructors, it behooves us to understand that students sometimes learn differently than other students on the line. It's not that the guy is an idiot or that he's not willing to put the effort in. It's just that whoever happens to be talking to that student at the time on the line isn't capable of reaching him. And that's not a failure of the instructor. It's just that it's a clash of teaching styles or modalities. So good instructors recognize the fact that they can't reach everybody, and they reach out to that student in other ways to get that information to the student.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with that. It's, sometimes it's difficult, especially doing the lone traveling show. And there's a reason why I've kind of set forth a certain method of how I've progressed of doing things to where I'll have to, obviously you want to explain demos very efficiently, or the drill, the course of fire, whatever it is, and all the reasons why. And then you'll have to demo it. And then I'll hot wash it after the demo with everybody. "Hey, is there questions? Do you understand what I'm asking?" All these things to try to reach everyone on some level, be it visual learners, be it, the auditory explanation guys, whatever the case is. And then hot wash it after the exercise and try to answer all those questions and figure out who's having that issue, which the paper doesn't lie. And then you kind of know right out of the gate who you're really going to have to keep that extra eye on, who you're going to have to not so much coddle a little bit more, but just give them a little bit more attention on certain things so they don't frustrate themselves and shut down on you and vapor lock. It's a very hard approach, and Mike nailed it. And so Justin, if you don't have 3 or 4 dudes or 2 or 3 guys or 2 or whatever, it's very difficult sometimes to reach every student individually. It is.
I like that. I like that. Talking about how your training style, reaching certain students. On the military side of the house, especially for on my side, as NCOs, non-commissioned officers, our charge is to train the soldiers that we lead. And so if you have an NCO that's set in his ways, not looking to push those limits, not looking to better himself, he's really perpetuating that level of mediocrity. He's teaching it to the next generation, who's in turn going to teach it to their next generation. And so it just keeps perpetuating itself. And it's so hard because there's just not a lot of knowledge within the Army that there is better out there, that there is, ways to train to better yourself. And I think if more guys were aware of it, that they would probably participate more in it. You're going to get just like you guys were talking about, those guys that just show up, they want to, punch the ticket, do their time and be out. But at the same time, I think that the vast majority, maybe not the vast majority, but certainly a lot of guys would love to, further develop their skills. It's just, I don't think there's a lot of, awareness of these types of courses within the military, because nobody stops to think, hey, how can I better myself outside of the military? Because they think, well, where would you learn to be a better infantryman? Nowhere, right? I mean, who else does this stuff besides us? So they kind of shut down that whole openness to seeking outside training before they even look for it, just simply from the fact that they're looking at this broad generalization of what their job is, and they're not looking at, hey, you can build on those individual skills and better your unit by bringing those skills to it. And I don't think they really see that. And so, especially as NCOs, man, we really got to look at ways to improve our training. That is our charge. That's our job, is to leave that unit, leave those soldiers better trained, more prepared, better than we would have found it. So, I'm really digging what we're hearing there. And I'm sure the panel here it's nothing new to them, but I mean, for guys listening to that stuff, man, you really, really got to broaden your horizons.
So, Rick, one of the ways you can approach it, and I know you're talking big green and all that, is that you explain to the kids under your charge and the people that develop the training pipelines that it's an organic process. And what I mean by that is it's a set, right? And within that set, there are subsets of skills. So, infantrymen, right? But what's one of the things that an infantryman needs to be really good at? Marksmanship. And what the general person gets, the general shooter gets in the infantry are minimal skills. There are other resources to advance your skills for better marksmanship, weapons malfunction clearances and whatnot, the basics that we talk about in, the combat triad mindset. And then when you add TTPs, instead of a stool, you have a chair. You have 4 legs on that. So you have to break it down from the major set, being an infantryman. What are the smaller subsets within that set, the components that make you a good infantryman? And then find a way to get those guys, as an NCO, get those guys at a better level, a higher level. And Prime knows this. I talk about this in classes, or I used to talk about this in classes a lot. It's not necessarily the best fighter that wins. It's the fighter that has the fewest mistakes. So I'm going to delve into something just tangentially, but it applies. The person that has the fewest variables in an engagement tends to win. So as an NCO or as an instructor or as somebody that's running the FTU or the training officer at a department or an agency, you want your guys to eliminate as many variables as possible and translate those into constants. Life is not arithmetic. Life is algebra. So you want to eliminate or translate those letters in that equation into numbers. And you do that by driving that process I keep hammering on. It's not the goal. It's how do you drive towards that goal? So as an NCO, you look at your guys and say, hey, we can do this, because it's an institutional and it's a group effort. But as individuals, what does that individual need to work on? He's great in the field doing this, this, and this, but his marksmanship sucks. So he needs to go into a shooting pipeline, and as NCOs, you need to find those classes either within the Army or outside of the Army to get the guys that are a little weak in that area. That's a variable for them. They need to translate into a constant. I'm not talking about elite level, grandmaster kind of shit. I'm just talking about becoming better than competent. So that's one way to approach it. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that process is, is valid no matter what area you apply it to. So, I mean, a lot of guys, I like to explain to guys in an analogy of like, PT, the physical fitness. A lot of guys who have a lot of information, there's a lot of knowledge out there about becoming physically fit, pushing those levels, getting better and getting better. And if they could take that mindset and apply it to other things, then the light bulbs start to come on. They're like, oh, I never thought of things like that. I always thought like, hey, if I scored expert on my the Army standard qual, I was good to go. Like, no, man, that's just mediocre as fuck. So how can we get better than
that? And don't get me wrong, that we're talking about experience and acquiring better skills, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be marksmanship. It can be your comms guys. Are they adequate or are they exceptional? Yeah, the standard says this, but with the changing environment that we all live in, do you want your guys to be adequate or do you want them to be slick? Do you want them to know some asymmetrical, weird, funky kind of Jedi magic shit? Well, they have to go outside the normal training pipelines in order to acquire that. And it may be an NCO or, a slick XO or something saying, hey, we got some money in the training budget to handle, lodging and travel, but the rest of it's on your dime. We'll cut you some time. Go to this guy. He's the guru. Take copious notes and come back and fucking relay this, pass along, the beta, the information to everybody else in the unit. Get to work, but people are hesitant to pull that trigger because it doesn't fit the paradigm. And Matt Prime was talking about this earlier. You got to change the paradigm. You have to have a sea change, and that requires a revolution. And you have to be careful about how you foment a revolution. You can be, a Molotov, cocktail throwing motherfuckers, which is kind of productive. Or you can be subtle, sneaky fucks. The guy that taught me to be a firearms instructor here, old dude from the Navy, Honolulu PD guy, right? He gave me a pretty sage bit of advice. He said that gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, solves all problems. So I can go in there and scream and yell and jump up and down on the desk and, get my ass handed to me, or I can be sneaky about it and just drop these subtle hints and be very selective in how I communicate. But it's like Chinese water torture drill. Drop, 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 drop. Eventually somebody's going to succumb, but if I just go in there and just scream and yell and say, or this isn't working, or we need to do it, or sir, or hey, sergeant or staff sergeant, this has to change. That's not going to work. A conversation works. And again, it goes back to what, Steve and I were talking about earlier. Part of this is institutional. And sometimes no matter what you do, you can't change the institution. So you have to be sneaky in a different way and select individuals and send them out in the world on their own with support and have them come back with that magic and, have a debriefing and take the takeaways from it, lessons learned. Hey, what did you learn in this, police sniper class, like you were talking about, that's different from what we do? Oh, I'd never fucking heard of that. Let's put that into our POI next time we go out on the range and do, KD stuff. And that's one of the ways to approach, altering the paradigm. But it's very, very difficult. You have to be very patient. And sometimes you're never going to see results. It's just not going to happen.
Absolutely. You got to be like the training Illuminati or some shit, you're behind the scenes pulling strings and just waiting for your your stuff to actually take hold. I totally agree, man.
It's an interesting segue going into, actually there are two segues here. One is our new friend, who's the 82nd Airborne Small Arms Master Gunner, who is now working with us and we're working with him. And what we're trying to do is put together ways of getting some of these learning concepts out to people through social media. So basically sneaking in some of this stuff so people can learn when they're They don't need to be in a formal classroom. They don't need to sign up for things. They can just be on Facebook and then look up and go, oh, well, here's some additional facts about how to load my rifle or whatever. That's sneaky, and it's effective, and it's cool. And the best part is it helps everyone. It's helping cops. It's helping the paratroopers. It's helping all the soldiers. I love it. I love the strategy.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely, man. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that, a lot of these changes that I think a lot of people are not really realize how much has been influenced by social media. I mean, so this doesn't have really anything to do with like training. In fact, it's more addressing institutional inertia. So as retarded as it sounds, rolling sleeves in the Army was a thing. Okay. And the pressure, maybe not pressure is the right word, but like the feedback that, the Sergeant Major of the Army was getting generally through social media instituted a change in how they allowed the uniform to be worn. Now to civilians, that might sound like something like very trivial and stupid. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but the fact of the matter is, before social media, these kind of changes did not happen with any type of swiftness, nor did it happen with the input of the rank and file soldier. This is some stuff that happened up at like Pentagon levels, and maybe it bled down to a couple echelons below for their input, but it certainly wasn't, private stuff. He's saying, hey, I prefer to roll my sleeves this way. I prefer to roll my sleeves that way. I want this PT uniform. I want to wear black socks with my PT uniform. All these little things, and it sounds insignificant, but it just goes to show the influence that social media has had over such a large organization like the Army. And I mean, if we can do that, if we can make those kind of changes, then the kind of changes that we're talking about with like 82nd SAMD, who's making awesome stuff and putting out products that can help revolutionize the way we train within the Army. It's not just possible, it's happening.
Yeah, I want to, before Matt jumps in, I want to tangentially touch that for just a second. So when you look at systems analysis and design, and I'm not talking about computer bullshit, which that's important, but just the organic concept of systems analysis and design. The first person you fucking talk to in a paradigm shift for a system is the end user, right? So if I'm going to change a departmental policy regarding, how we do our range qualifications, the first person I'm going to talk to is the guy that just finished FTO. Hey, what do you think about this? You got kids and a family, and you're covering all the shitty shifts, and you got a second job and all that. What works for you? Unfortunately, in the real world, in most instances, it's a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach. So just like Rick was saying, you can apply pressure to have a paradigm change or a sea change or a paradigm shift by going bottom up in your systems analysis and design. So a lot of people are, that's anathema to them. It's abhorrent to them. They don't want to delve into talking to the lowly blue collar kid in the program or in the unit or the agency or the business, because what do they know? They're just cogs in the wheel. I'm the CEO, or I'm the boss, or I'm the chief. I've been to FLETC and I've been to NTOA, and this is what they say. These are the standards. Well, those may be the standards for those people, but for your department, that may not be the standard. It might not apply. So talking to the worker bees first, you tend to have less conflict and you get better results. Anyway, that's all I want to say about that. Sorry, Matt. You had another point you were going to make, Prime.
It's just basically the next level beyond this. So if you guys still want to discuss this, we can wait for the next step.
No, just drive on, dude.
Cool. Basically, the next step is you go to these classes. You go to the same class, the same instructor over and over and over, and it doesn't have that magic anymore. It's not the same, but it is the same. Nothing's changed. You have changed. I get reports from people saying, well, primary and secondary, it's not the same as it used to be. It was so much better then. Well, primary and secondary hasn't changed. It's you. You've improved. You've learned. You've gotten awesome. To reach to get beyond this plateau takes a lot more effort, and it takes a lot more study.
Try teaching it. That's where you learn this shit, man.
Yeah.
You can only do so much achieving it and saying, okay, I'm good at this. And then you have to figure out, how do I teach this? You have to reverse engineer how you learn this, how this took place, and then say, okay, I'm going to put that together and show it to other people, and be able to articulately explain to somebody how you do this, then demonstrate it, and then have them demonstrate it to you. That's where you're going to get that next level of knowledge, is just teaching it and learning to teach it.
And I'm at a disadvantage because I'm in a position like that. I get to teach that. However, we have a lot of people that aren't in that position. How do they overcome it if they can't teach? Anyone?
What's going to prevent them from teaching?
It's interesting talking to people. They self-assess and determine they're not ready yet.
Keep learning, buddy. You're not there yet then.
Yeah. The problem with that is too, like, egos will get in the way, their own ego especially.
Oh, dude, totally.
Oh, yeah. It's like a massive, no shit, factual data point that the egos will crush dudes. Or they'll drive them to a point where, like, yeah, I've done this, I've done that, I can start teaching now. It's a whole nother world. And most of them, unfortunately, just become parroters of things that they previously learned, right or wrong. Or indifferent.
Instead of understanding the basis behind it and actual.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. Yeah.
Well, I'm dealing with, we kind of dealing with that stuff right now, and on a team level, because you get guys that want to be in that teaching circle, that want to be that authority, and then they'll teach something slightly different, and it starts to mess with the continuity of everything.
It really does, especially in institutions like that, even in Rick's world. We find a lot of times the easiest way to do this is when we're either developing programs for agencies like qual courses, stuff like that. The teach backs are important to have the instructors teaching the other instructors.
Yes, absolutely.
And so teach backs are huge. They have to be there. They have to be proficient in the material. They have to be proficient in the shooting. I mean, honestly, if they don't have a good understanding of why things are occurring or why those things are happening, either via their trigger press or just, inconsistencies in grip, any of those little things, if they don't understand those dynamics, they really can't be as effective. And that's the problem, is really getting the guys on the line, giving them a full-blown, no bullshit, one-day diagnostics course of why the problems are occurring, and then getting them to teach that back either to themselves, to peers, or to others. Man, it's such a hard thing. It really is. And dudes just don't get it because they don't understand it. But they all want to be that guy up there that everybody looks at. And it's like, dude, I got news for you. This is a lot of years of shit.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, Steve, is I think what Matt's getting at is after you've achieved that, after you've gotten to that point where you can self-diagnose, you're taking slow motion videos of yourself and breaking down every movement of everything that you're doing. Yes. And you're actually self-diagnosing and saying, okay, this is where I'm screwing up here. This is where I'm screwing up here. And you're fixing those problems and you achieve it. And say I'm going to Sentinel Concepts course over and over and over, and I get to a point to where I have arrived. I have this shit down pat. Mm-hmm. At what point, where do I start to try to teach myself further? Is try to show somebody else. Try to take that information and actually do something with it. Because like we talked about earlier, budget-wise, it's impossible for me to send a 30-man team to you. It's impossible for me to send a 200-man department to you. Somebody has to bring that information back and actually do something with it as intended, as I'm sure as you intend for your courses to go. Mm-hmm. It's not all-inclusive to just a guy that attends the course. If it's somebody that's been through your course 10 times, you're fully expecting him to take that information and do some good and save some lives in a gunfight at his agency.
No, you're absolutely right on that. One of the best pieces of information that I was ever given by a guy, Dave Harrington, as goofy as Dave is, love him to death. Something Dave told me back in like 2005 or 6 just hit home hard. And it was, dude, teach what you learned, not what you were taught.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, that just shifted the whole world right there. I was like, damn him. I hate it when he does that. But, and that's the hard thing again, is really getting guys to understand what they are learning.
Yeah. So let's go back to the apple pie for a second, right?
I like apple pie.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about, you think you've acquired a bunch of skills, and Steve was talking about parroting. Instructors go out there and parrot, or copy or template other instructors, intellectual property and work product. Justin was talking about, go out and teach it. Okay. So here's the thing. I'm making an apple pie. I'm following, let's see, Brave Tart is a site I follow. She is a world-class chef. She's in Lexington, Kentucky, and she posts a bunch of fucking knowledge on the internet. And she spent years and years honing her craft. You could follow her recipe for an apple pie and get pretty accomplished at it and turn out a pretty good apple pie. But do you know why the apple pie turned out well? Let me give you a couple examples. You're making an apple pie, right? Do you use cold apples or room temperature apples? How do you measure your sugar? Do you grind your own cinnamon, or do you use powdered cinnamon? How fresh is the cinnamon? Do you understand how the dough works? You have flour in the dough. How old is the dough? What kind of flour is it? Is it late winter wheat from Montana? It has a different gluten percentage in it than something from, Iowa or Nebraska. So there's a science that's not understood by the average consumer in making the apple pie that the master understands. They understand all the subtle intricacies that go into making that apple pie perfect every single time. So while somebody's out there and they think, Matt's talking about, well, I've learned everything on primary and secondary, it's stale. Well, you're stale. Did you go out and find out why the gluten, percentage in this type of wheat will affect the crust on that apple pie? Do you understand the science behind it?
That's what I was getting at, Frank, earlier when I followed you up earlier was, have you tasted their apple pie?
Exactly.
Have you been there and seen it and been shown how much of an ass you are?
Right. Well, it's not just tasting their apple pie. I mean, you made the same apple pie that they put on the recipe. And you want to, talk about fish. Eric Repair is the best fish chef in the country, right? And you can follow his recipes. You can do his seared scallop recipe. You can go to La Bernardin in New York and eat his seared scallop recipe. But the trick to the thing is to sit in the kitchen with him for 6 months and learn how to prep it, how to dry it, what kind of pan you use, how much oil you use. Do you crowd the scallops? If you do, they steam instead of sear, right? That's where the magic is. And a lot of people that go out there that want to hang out their shingle and be an instructor, or that want to self-diagnose, and I'll talk about that in a second, they don't understand that that's the level of work that goes into acquiring that knowledge. It's the subtle, like Steve was talking about, crush grip versus non-crush grip, thumb over wrist, all that kind. You can watch stuff on YouTube and go to a bunch of classes and think you're all that in a bag of chips, but do you understand the science behind it?
Yep.
Most people don't. So let's talk about self-diagnosis for a second. You can do a bit of self-diagnosis by doing slow motion video. The problem is if you go to the same instructors all the time and they give you a certain philosophy in training and a certain philosophy on how to run your gear, that's all you know. And so when you do self-diagnosis, what you may be seeing may not be what the problem actually is. True. It's better to have somebody that's knowledgeable, that's outside of that paradigm, put eyes on you or that video and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. Let me give you an example. So the Bianchi Cup happens in Columbia every year in May. And I was out there doing some stuff with the academy. We were done for the day. And I'm rolling back in all my fucking, Safari Land shit and my 1911, wearing all my jocked up and all my shit. There's somebody on the moving range, very famous person. And my brother and I are walking by. And this shooter, who's very accomplished, said, "Hey, can you come take a look at this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll look at it, but I don't do what you do. My world's different than yours, but I'll look at you." And the shooter goes, "Well, I'm having a hard time because I'm not getting the consistent hits that I normally get." And this shooter had somebody that was tuning pistols and magazines, loading magazines, taking care of their ghost rig, putting up targets, working on the mover, had a still photographer and a videographer, and probably somebody making fucking sandwiches for all I know. And I'm just watching this person shoot moving targets. And I noticed that this person was flaring an elbow on the draw stroke, which was inconsistent from time to time. And I pointed that out. And they swore up and down, and all their minions said, "No, that shooter doesn't do that." And I'm like, "Bullshit, look at the video." And they rolled the video back and said, "You're right, flaring an elbow." So they slowed back down to get better repetitions. Remember, we talked about process, and eliminated that variable and translated it back into the constant that they once had. So sometimes self-diagnosis doesn't work because you don't see what's right before you. You don't have the right set of eyes to make the diagnosis. So it does work, but it doesn't work all the time, is my point.
You just have to be objective. You have to look at yourself critically.
Yeah, but sometimes your mindset and your understanding of what you're doing, you have cognitive bias.
Yes.
So what you're looking for may not actually be the problem. You see a problem, but it's not the actual problem. I'm not saying that doesn't help, but sometimes, it's like when people are looking for lost keys in a house. The people that live in the house, they're oblivious because they walk right by the keys because they're so tuned into their house and so oblivious to their own surroundings that they miss them. Somebody else walks in the house, so they're right here on the table.
Yes.
Or your sunglasses are on your head, right? That kind of crap.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to go outside of your own perceptions or your own agency's perceptions or your own unit's perceptions and have a different set of eyes to spot the issue, that variable in that equation, and fix that variable and make it a constant.
You can also get overly focused, depending upon personality, on the things you were doing wrong and not reinforcing the things you were doing right.
Just like what Rick was saying, gaining that additional perspective. Go to different instructors.
Yep.
We talk about like reaching those plateaus, like you're kind of talking about. And for me, it's really difficult because most of my practice sessions anymore are when I'm teaching. Especially my travel schedule, I'm looking at 60 some events this year. It's ridiculous. And for me to get, you get done, you come off the road, you deal with all the house shit, whatever it is. The last thing you want to do is go practice. The last thing I want to do is go to the range, get my timer, get my shit on, and literally go to the range and shoot 200 rounds or whatever it is. And for me anymore, I found myself in the past year and a half, kind of lacking that, more being on the sustainment level versus going to a better performance level to a certain degree in some things. While my shooting has been better, much better in the accuracy world, my times have slowed down. And it's usually at the presentation. So for me, I know, hey, factual, I need to sit here, set the timer, and, get in the basement, throw a holster on, and do, 25 reps of whatever, set the timer in a part time of 2 seconds, from concealment, or 1.5 or whatever it is that I'm working on that particular time frame. I think guys often overlook setting kind of their personal goals, like a lot of dudes do, either in lifting, running, whatever the case may be, something that kind of, mirror image, another process with their shooting program or whatever the case is. For me, it's literally at times forcing myself to say, you need to go do this. You need to put that shit on for 10, 15 minutes, grab the timer and do it. But it's getting guys, again, to do it, even us on, some of our levels. And it's not an ego thing. It's a factual thing that, there's some of us that are at a certain performance level where we're just not going to progress past that without outside influence. For me, the big one is like this year is going to go see Ernie Langdon. I've got to get in class with Ernie. I've got to be pushed. I've got to do that, or Rob Latham this year. That's my next, my next sources again. And I have to seek it out. And again, it's coming back to that lazy or that ego thing where guys just don't want to seek out a way to get past that plateau or where they're at because they're comfortable. They want to live in that comfortable little bubble. How do we get guys to get beyond that?
show them their ass, Steve. That's it. If you've got a guy who's confident and wants to drive on and wants to be the best, wants to be good, he's got to be somebody that gets shown his ass from time to time.
I agree.
And get his ego handed to him. That's why people love Darcy, man. It's everybody thinks they're the king of CQB, and you go in there and you get your ass handed to you, and you're like, okay, I'm listening up, and you get 100% attention span for the rest of the week after night one.
Yeah.
And it goes the same way with shooting, man. We show up out at Shaw's and you get your ass handed to you by, one of the guys, and it's like, okay, I'm listening up. You got me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what does it for me and most of the guys in my circle. There's different personalities. It just depends on who you are. But for the guy that thinks he's there, he has to be shown that he ain't it.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a hard thing to, I won't say do as an instructor, because there's times you don't want to necessarily show off. Let's call it, no, fuck it, I'll call it what it is. Yeah, there's times you want to show off and burn a dude down. I mean, it's just,
yes,
there is. I'm going to call it what it is. I had that recently. I teach a block of instruction here locally. It's a 4-hour, you might shoot 100 rounds handgun diagnostics class. It's all about, instead of an old program that I had developed years ago at another place I was at, teaching people how to be better shooters, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to fix 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, of bad habits in 8-hour day.
Yeah.
Or 16 hours or 20 hours, whatever it is. And instead, when I really started breaking it down, I was like, holy shit, I know how to fix this. I'll show them everything that they're doing wrong. And I literally reverse psychology that showed them everything they're doing wrong, and the performance has now been there, and it gives them the things to practice when they're away. I've literally shown them what they're doing wrong, how to not do that wrong anymore, and just kind of give them the reasons to practice. But I had a guy come into the class. He was 2 hours late to the class, which was amazing. He was in the parking lot doing emergency work calls, which I get, life happens. Local IDPA shooter, good guy. He just had that smug kind of quiet, yeah, I don't even know why I'm here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the end of the class, we're doing a simple 100-point aggregate B8 hit at 25 yards. That's all we're doing, just to end on a good, solid note, let guys just kind of get back in the groove of things after all the meltdown of their minds and do this. And he gets up there and, he fires off 10 rounds probably in 15 seconds. Cool story. I'm like, awesome. So, the lines are done. I'm like, hey, I'm not done yet. I get my shot. I get my turn at this. And pulled out the gun, did the same thing. Probably fired him in less time than he did. Granted, I was running an RMR gun and, shot a 93 in like 10 and a half seconds. And I was just like, And he just kind of looked at me and he realized at that point, yeah, I probably should have paid more attention to what the hell was going on and been here a little bit earlier. But you hate to do that, but sometimes you need to show dudes their own ass. And not saying that I haven't had my ass handed to me. God knows I have many times. I am not the end all of this. That's absolutely not the case, what I'm saying. But you need to have your ass handed to you. And you're absolutely right. You definitely need that.
Yeah. And it's, Steve, do you do live demos in your courses?
Oh, absolutely. A metric fuck ton. Yeah.
And that's that's something I like to see when I go somewhere is I want to see what you got. If we're shelling out good money to be there, I want to see what we're there paying for. And that's part of it, man. It's if somebody steps out in front of me and does a live demo and I'm looking at a drill, it's Rick LaGrease on the P&S drill, that fucking crazy H drill he did back in June of last year.
That thing's stupid.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I watch that drill, I step out, I'm like, no, I'm trying this. Next training, my whole team's out there. We're out there fucking with it and working the mechanics through and just, it was something different for us to do. And everybody gets their ass handed to them off of a YouTube video and we're breaking down the mechanics of it. And that's something I can definitely appreciate is when I walk out on the range and somebody's shooting and they do a drill and I'm looking at it like, holy fuck, how did that just happen?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's necessary. And in that live demo, you're handing somebody their ass and you've got their attention at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You know, it's funny because like in my pistol classes, I do a cold hit first shot of the day. It kind of gives me an idea of what everybody's doing, how they're working their guns. You know, it's basically the shakedown. So, you know, again, I'll use it as an example. I'll do a standard, 10 round, 25 yard B8 hit or whatever target we're using at that point.
Yeah.
And okay, this is just a simple exercise to let me see gun handling, where the little tweaks are going to start to come into play. Who's my problem children, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'll shoot it cold before the students do. I will do it cold in the morning before they do it. And hey, I will fuck up like everybody else will at some point. But the difference is between like us or them or some of those other people is that, I'll use it as a teaching point of, hey, yeah, I shanked round 3 and I knew it. And I'll call it as I do it. Like round number 3, that's out high right or whatever. Guys are like, well, wait a minute. I said, this is the consistency. This is how I know because I've done this practice so much or done these, whatever it is. And to be able to shoot it, call it, see it, and show it to dudes is important. I believe 100%. If you're not demoing it, you're not doing it in front of your students, you're wrong.
Yep.
Well, there's a couple of personalities like that IDPA guy you'll never reach unless you give him that slap upside the head.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a wider personality set that won't like, a lot of the military guys. You go teach a SWAT class or a military class or whatnot, like you said, or like Justin said, they want to see what they're paying for or at least see why they're there. And they want to have a guy who can stand up and not just dictate to them.
Yeah. I saw that at a conference last year. Matter of fact, while I was teaching for Pat in Indiana that week in May. And it was interesting, 20 some different SWAT cops, personalities and egos, and we've all got them. And that's great. You have to have it. Everybody wants to be the A-type. And, there were certain guys, certain demos, we're talking about specifically some shooting on the move stuff. And, got him to do the demo and dude was like, oh, yeah, he's kind of serious about what he wants us to do. I'm like, yeah, I'm dead serious about this. And there's reasons behind it. And these are the reasons why, but I have to give it to them visually. They have to see it. They have to know that I understand it. I can perform it because I expect them to do it. And it's nothing that's unobtainable. It's absolutely well within reach. They just have to be willing to do it after they've seen it.
But if they're not, especially if you're introducing a new concept or a change on a concept, like something simple, like putting your gun on safe during mag changes.
Yeah.
That can be a hard sell to a lot of guys for years not done it.
Sell a ready position to somebody, Matt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Demonstrating that all of their objections, because they'll come up with a million of them like on the fucking spot, are basically bullshit, and you can see it's not the case, is a good way to at least maybe minimize those guys, those couple naysayers to the group. Mm-hmm. Like the ones who have influence, who are the self-proclaimed fonts of knowledge.
Yes.
This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah. So let me jump in on that for just a second. So teaching a class, you're going to run into knuckleheads that just are not set to receive, right? They're not willing to empty their teacup, so to speak. And you might have valid reasons and good science behind what you're explaining and demonstrating. And you can have, all sorts of documentation, but some people are so used to doing things a certain way, or their department will not deviate from that SOP and those POIs. You can never reach those people. And so as an instructor, how do you deal with that? Well, the people that are set to receive and that get what you're saying, you work with them. And I tell the other guys, when people come into class, the first thing I say is, anything I'm teaching you, if it's contrary to your POI or your SOP or department,
yep.
And it's going to screw you up, I don't want to try to reprogram you in a 3-day class.
Yep.
So as long as you're safe and getting good terminal hits on that paper, I'm cool with that. I want to see consistency. That's my first thing, is I want to see consistency and safety. Safety primary, obviously. But you're going to get guys that are just not going to fucking set to receive. They're just not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So as instructors, you have to say, okay, well, these 3 dudes from this department on the end at this class I'm teaching in Indiana, in Boone County, they have a different mentality and perspective and ideology based on the department that they work at. I don't want to fuck them up. Mm-hmm. They're accomplished shooters. They're safe. You know, I'm going to focus on some other things with those 3 shooters on the end of the line on a relay 2 to make them better in other areas. I can't reach them on this one concept, so I'm going to avoid that with them because they're still getting great hits on the target. You know, it's within that, 8-inch, it's within that 8-inch circle, center of mass consistently in that 2-inch box in the brain box. I'm not going to fuck with that because that's what they were taught and they're accomplished shooters. But here's some other areas I can work on. And there's nothing you can do about that. There's absolutely zero you can do about that. You have to, as a good instructor or good instructors, if it's multiple instructors in a class, you have to realize that that's going to be an obstacle. You have to find ways to work around it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's like, teaching a department to go and start working with high ready, with a carbine, versus 10 years of them teaching nothing but low ready, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. I don't care what it is. It's hard to reach them. It truthfully is. And the ones you can't reach or the ones you can't change those SOPs, you just have to really rely on focusing on something else to make them just that little bit much more better. We'll tell the guys all the time, hey, if this goes against your department's, SOP of whatever the case is, great. Take a look at it, re-examine it at a later date and time during your own rage workups, figure it out. I'll give you the whys behind it. If it's not for you, great. Go back to what you've been doing, but I want you to perform this task, blah, 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 blah. Just omit this, this ready position. Whatever the case is,
right.
It's like, well, and as well too, it's like when you're teaching PD guys, trying to get them to understand that, hey, you need to be working your radio as well right after the shots.
Yeah.
It's just those little things. It's like, they're like, oh, yeah, we didn't think about that. Yeah, dude, you still need to cover down on that, dude. You still need to be working, working your mics, everything you need to do. Just fake it, do whatever it is you normally do, but key up your shit, and do what you would do for real. Give them that one extra little thing that they can take back or take away that they normally don't do during their quals or anything else.
Right, and that's so, and Fisher and everybody else, that's a layering of fundamentals. Remember, I said there are no advanced skills. That's bullshit. I don't subscribe to that fucking concept at all. Anybody that says that's fucking wrong in my book. Yeah. So, you got to drill a shooting drill. When you're done with the shooting drill, what do you do after that? You just shot a suspect on a felony, car stop. What's the next thing you do? Get on the fucking radio and call it in. Right? So I want guys to simulate that because those are good free repetitions. They're fucking free. Nobody's shooting back at you. Nobody's punching you in the fucking grill. Yeah. Fucking do it. If that means I slow the class down just a hair to allow those guys on the line to do that iteration, I'm going to slow the class down on the line just a little bit on that drill set, just so they can get those repetitions in there. Yeah, a lot of instructors won't do that.
Those extra 5 to 10 seconds is not to slow the class down. It's
well, I mean, in the perception of the non-PD, non-LE, non-MIL guys, it does. So you have to explain to them, hey, this is how I'm going to run the line, and this is why I'm doing this. So that the civilian shooter, the guy that goes because it's his golfing trip or whatever, he understands that these guys need to learn this and practice this. Yeah. And I explain to them, it's just like you have somebody come in your house, you have to drop them there. You make sure that they're no longer a threat. Got to call the cops. Yeah, it's comms, right? It's no different. It's just a different area of involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I did a lot of times with that is when it's a mixed class like that, I'll throw in the next layer of it is while they're doing their radio call, whatever the case may be at this point, is that I'll make sure dudes are still checking themselves for self-aid. In that world, it's like, hey, we're going to radio, even on the citizens that are in the class, the civilians that are in the class, hey, now you need to be checking yourself and others for self-aid, buddy aid, whatever the case may be. If your family's with you, you just do a quick sweep of your body. And that way they don't feel lost reps or any loss of time. You just add another progressive layer that is a beneficial layer that they should still be looking at and practicing.
Right. So, hey, Matt, I got a question for you. Prime. You there?
I am.
You want me to get into how building engrams and cognition works or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody that wants to jump in, I'm pretty cool with this stuff. if you want to learn how you learn, do some research into how kids acquire language. That was one of the seminal research projects and science on how cognition works. Basic, but it applies across the board in what we do, be it making an apple pie or, doing a failure drill and dropping a dude with terminal hits, and then self-assessing, getting on the radio and all that stuff. There are layers to this stuff. And each one of those layers is a fundamental. In order to build the fundamental, we talked about go and process earlier. In order to build a fundamental, you have to understand how information acquisition and reinforcement works. So the brain works in a very pretty much straightforward way. You're introduced to a subject, and Fisher mentioned this earlier, and a couple other people did too. Different people learn different ways. You have people that are visual. So if you write something on a whiteboard or a blackboard, that's how they learn. You have people that are oral. They learn by listening. So if you're writing on the blackboard and you're also discussing something, you're discussing what you're doing, the visual learners and the oral learners will pick up on what you're saying. Some people are spatial learners. Those are the people that make good engineers and car mechanics and whatnot. They do things with their hands and they see things spatially. So that goes to what Steve was saying. You explain something initially, you might write it on the whiteboard or the blackboard, and you get on the line and you demonstrate it. So you've covered all the major bases on cognitive acquisition. So you don't lose anybody in your class. So I'm going to talk about controlled pairs. And we're going to shoot controlled pairs with the carbine at 15 meters, right? Excuse me, or 25 meters, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to explain it and why it's important. I'm going to explain the difference between the control pair and a hammer pair and why the difference is important. And when you would use them, I might write it on the board. I might demonstrate it with, dummy rounds in a magazine in front of a class safely. I'll go out there and demonstrate it. Right. So now I've captured all the different types of learners' attention, and they're starting to process that information. Excuse me. They're taking it from initial introduction of a concept or a philosophy or a fundamental, and they're dropping it into very short-term memory. It has to be reinforced. How do you reinforce that? You get them on the line and have them shoot the drill, right? And it's the type of repetitions and the number of repetitions that solidify that acquisition of information from short-term memory cache into a kind of medium-term memory cache, and then eventually with good repetitions into long-term memory. Let me ask the guys on the panel a question. Why is it easy to remember a phone number? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
It's not.
It is. Shut up. Why is it easy to remember a phone number?
There's a pattern to it.
Nah, it's the amount of bits of information that you can store in temporary memory. And who determined or who did the research on figuring out how much the human brain can store in that very short-term memory? Anybody want to know? Anybody guess? Anybody want to know? Bell Labs, a long time ago, when they were trying to figure out how to develop phone numbers, figured out that you can store in very short-term memory 7 to 10 digits. That's why phone numbers are 7 to 10 digits. If you go beyond that, it's hard to take it into very short-term memory and process it into kind of a medium-term memory. So when you go out and you get digits from your date, and she gives you your phone number or he gives you your phone number, and you repeat it enough times correctly, it goes from that short-term to mid-term to long-term memory. The more you use it, the harder it is to forget. I'll never forget my fucking parents' phone number because I used it a million times, right? And that's called that's a heuristic algorithm, or those are engram mapping or cognitive mapping. So getting back to the line, we're shooting control pairs. I've demonstrated, discussed, written it down. It's in their mind somewhat. Now, there's two approaches to reinforcing that information, right? A lot of instructors tend to open up a 3-inch fucking fire hose on students and want them to acquire everything immediately and be expert. That doesn't work. Okay, that's called stacking. Okay, there's two types of there's two concepts in acquisition called stacking and grouping. And Mech can jump in when he wants to on this because he kind of knows what I'm talking about. So if I'm on the line, I'm doing control pairs at 15 meters with the carbine, and I have to watch 10 people on a relay. I've got 2 instructors, me and Fisher, are watching 10 dudes on a relay. And I have them do 50 fucking repetitions of control pairs at 15 meters, right? Without any corrective measures. Where were the errors? I don't know, and neither does the student, right? And not only that, if they're wearing all their kit and it's 105 degrees in Yuma in, April, right, Rick? At some point, there's a law of diminishing returns. They just want to get through the repetitions. And they're not focusing on good repetitions. Man, I got 10 more of these motherfuckers to do, as opposed to I'm still slapping the trigger, or I'm not focusing on my front sight, or I'm too worried about my wobble area, or I'm not doing a good reset on my trigger. They're not focusing on those subtle things. They're focusing on getting it done. They're looking at the goal, not the process. So that's stacking. It's a shit ton of repetitions without any corrective measures. The problem with that is that you're introducing bad repetitions into the equation, and you have to deprogram those at some point. Now let's talk about grouping. If you look at grouping, I'm showing control pairs at 15 meters with the carbine, center of mass. I want good terminal hits, then in that 8-inch, 6-inch circle, depending on the metric. And Fisher and I are watching the line. I'm going to do 10 repetitions. Then we're going to stop, download the rifles. We're going to go take the targets. And as instructors, Steve and I have 5 students apiece. We've been watching the students. We're going to say, hey, you're still a little low left as a right-handed shooter. You're probably fucking doing something wrong with your trigger. Next time you're on the line, I want you to think about that, and I'll watch you. Just remind me. And then I will kick those guys off to go jam eggs, hydrate, and urinate. And I'll bring the second relay up, and we'll do the same 10 repetitions. What's going on with the first relay? They're back there jamming mags, hydrating, and urinating, and talking amongst themselves. When they're talking or they're being introspective and contemplative, they're processing the information that Steve and I gave them on the line. That's one small 10 repetition set. Second relay does the same thing. I kick them loose, and I bring the first relay back, and I have them do it again. Now, Steve was talking about layering things, right? Fundamentals, layered fundamentals. So the second time they come up, I'm going to have them do the same drill, but I'm going to add one more variable. When you're done, work on your scanning and assessing and get on your comms. That's all I want you to add. That's it. So now they're doing the same thing they did the first time, which is reinforcing what I told them. It's taking them out of, very short-term memory and putting it into that kind of medium cache, that medium memory, because they've gotten 10 repetitions. They're getting another 10 repetitions for a total of 20. And the entire time, Steve and I are watching shooters. We're looking at the target. We're watching their fingers. We're looking at their body position, how they're mounting the rifle or the carbine, whatever. So we're giving corrective measures the entire time. So second relay comes up, does the same thing. We send the first relay back. They're jamming mags, urinating and hydrating, maybe eating a Snickers or some shit. And they're doing the same thing. They're reflecting on what they learned. But they have one more layer, a fundamental, that they have to build into that equation. It helps reinforce the first drill we did initially. So you continue with those grouping exercises within that set. So instead of having one big set of 50 repetitions, we have 50 repetitions of 10 and 5. So that helps that reinforcement. It's a trickle off of a hose versus a 3-inch fire hose full blast, and they can't get a sip off of that. So that's how cognitive acquisition works. And that's how you deprogram shitty shooters and give them corrective advice and build new skill sets and new fundamentals into what they're doing. Steve, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, you hit it on the money. You can only give them so much at a certain time over a certain, point. And the best way to do it, honestly, is the stacking. It's just keep layering on the layers where it's almost to the point they don't even realize they're getting the same reps with another skill set involved, but they just keep building on and building on and building on, because let's face facts, we'll lose guys, they'll get bored, they'll just fall apart on us. And you're 100% correct on it.
Meckley, you want to say anything?
Nope. Pretty much just made me realize what you and Pat were doing.
Yeah, I mean, you some instructors are big on a shit ton of repetitions, and I have a problem with that for the reason that where do you find the error and where do you make the corrective measure? When you do smaller subsets within the greater set, you can find those errors and work on them. If I'm doing 50 repetitions of controlled pairs, where's the diminishing return point?
Yeah, and I have a tendency when I'm talking to guys about, like, I want them to have all the info, because it's like the articles in stages that Matt's been doing with was it Master and Miller, introducing that information, especially something as fucking dogmatic as shooting, that to the military. Doing it in baby steps and letting them assimilate and then wrap that up into the next step, et cetera, instead of just, here's all the information now, half the shit you're doing is wrong or fucky, is it probably a better way to go.
And honestly, I think this is one of the reasons why we lose guys so much during quals. It's become so, the dogmatic thing. It's the same reps over and over. It's the same known skill set over and over. It's the same process that they're going through without anything challenging, without any of the layers, none of it. And this is why we lose guys. This is honestly part of it, is why we have that, oh God, I got to go qual again. Oh, I got to go to the range. I got to go do in-service, because it's the same repetitive bullshit over and over and over.
Yeah, and so it doesn't take a lot to change that just a little bit to make it enticing and kind of spicy. Look, malfunction clearance drills suck. Everybody hates to fucking do them. As an instructor, they're a pain in the ass to set up. As a student, they're a pain in the ass to solve. We'll talk about carbine as an example, right? Because it's a little bit more complicated than a pistol because there are more variables involved. But, so if I'm teaching malfunction clearance drills with the carbine, I explain the differences in the malfunctions. I demonstrate how you clear them, and I'll have the guys do, a couple repetitions on the line. I'll kick them loose because it takes a long time to set it up and do all that crap. So it's more time consumption, more time resources, more time intensive, excuse me. And then I'll bring the second relay up and do it. We're doing grouping here. We're going to layer fundamentals, and I'll have them come back the second time, do it again, and maybe have them do it with their eyes closed, because that simulates no light, or diminished light. That's why I hate fucking sports. Observe. What the fuck can you see in the dark? Seriously. So most of us that do this for a living know the difference between what we teach and why sports is fucking wrong. You have to explain to the student. But so the second iteration in that group is eyes closed, and I'll kick them loose. Second relay comes up, does it, and then the third time they come up, that small set, that group, I'll have them do a malfunction clearance drill, and I'll have them really focus on their marksmanship. So I might say do a failure drill as opposed to a hammer pair or a control pair. So now it's two fundamental sets that I'm reinforcing: the malfunction clearance drill and getting good terminal hits on the target downrange. So you have to slow down after you clear your malfunction, make sure you're all spun up, and take those good shots. And I'll explain why. It's like modified Navy qual. Shoot when you're shooting, reload when you're reloading. Don't overlap or confuse the two. They're two separate entities, right? So that's how you build these skills, and people get wrapped around the axle because they're trying to outdo the dude on the line to the right of them that's a fucking stud, instead of shooting their own target, which is another big headache in classes. All instructors know. You have to go up to your students and say, hey, see that guy to your right or left? They're studs. Don't do what they do. You're not there yet. Do what you do. Focus on your target and your skill acquisition. I'll watch you. Ignore the sound and the fury to your right and your left. That's not you. You have to do your thing. as a good instructors, you know that, and you're up there and you're encouraging them and correcting them. But there's a huge difference between doing a shit ton of repetitions with no corrective measures and not understanding how cognitive acquisition works, or cognitive mapping, or engram building, or establishing heuristic algorithms. If you don't understand that as an instructor, you're wrong. That's why parroting doesn't work. You can't template somebody else's intellectual property and work product and be a successful instructor. You can get guys through a class, but they're never going to learn anything. So Justin, how's it work down your way? What do you think?
You're putting me on the spot here, dude.
That's okay. I mean, when you take guys to the range and you run them through a package of drills, right? Do you do a lot of repetitions?
No. So we're a complete building block approach. If I'm teaching somebody brand new, it is step one, fundamentals the whole way through. I'm not big on just fucking blowing rounds down range and not knowing what's going on. So I'm going to show a guy, obviously teach the drill verbally, demonstrate the drill, and then have him demonstrate it for me, and then go from there, build it up, and show him fundamentally how to do this correctly and why that's going on. So we're big on the why. If at any time, anybody who's teaching on our range or in our shoot house, if they can't answer the why, they're not going to be teaching. And with that, we're going to be telling them the why before they ever have to ask. So I want a solid understanding cognitively and physically of what's going on around them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Meckley, what do you think?
Yeah. So trying to kind of assimilate all that. I've seen that more from personal experience in the last couple of years than I was really aware of prior. I see the value, and I'm much more focused in what I'm doing in smaller chunks than I am trying to spread a shit ton of knowledge everywhere, because eventually people are just going to turn you off. They don't want to hear all of that, or they just can't assimilate. They're not going to be able to assimilate. I didn't get all of that within, a day. So how can I expect somebody to take the cumulative shit that I've learned over the past 10 years and assimilate that down into a day? It's just not going to happen.
You'd be amazed at what you can get somebody up to in a day, though.
Oh yeah. You can make massive improvements, especially with little shit like just tweaking efficiency.
Yes,
can produce massive improvements, stopping them doing the herky jerky. But when it comes to the knowledge side of things, especially if it runs counter to what they might already think, that can be, sometimes you got to know, like, okay, I'm gonna eventually win you over. However, I need to wear down that castle a little bit before I can make my point.
You do that with, or the way I do that is the same thing I was talking about with Steve earlier, is demonstrate to them that this is 100% achievable. It's not even really hard if you just apply the fundamentals properly. If you're a high ready, a guy that's dead set against a high ready, and he's, we're doing a one shot to the head, which is a 4-inch circle, whatever, in less than 1.1, which is the Shaw standard, Mid-South standard, and they're doing low readies in 0.81, and you can demonstrate high ready, mount it, get one shot to the head in 0.6, you got their attention at that point.
Yeah.
So Rick, what do you think?
Well, applying to our side, I really like what was said about the why. I try to do that same exact approach in teaching any of my guys what's going on, because coming from the background that they do, lots of times the why is it's not explained for not just for brevity, but because I don't want to say it's just a mindless indoctrination, but in order for certain things to work, they need to be able to follow instructions without question and do it. Now, the problem with that is when that type of thinking becomes applied to everything that they do or everything that they're ever instructed. Shoot this claw this way because we tell you to. Move this way because we tell you to. Carry your weapon this way because we tell you to. Set up your gear this way because we tell you to. That when it starts getting ingrained in them that this type of thinking is what needs to happen in order to be successful, it kind of stymies the learning process. And so I find that I got to go back and say, hey, the reason we do this with our radios is this. The reason it doesn't work is because of this. The reason
That's exactly how institutional inertia happens. That's how it happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Kind of going back to what I said before about like there being egos, and I could make this point and then bounce for a meeting. Egos that can kind of become that institutional inertia gatekeeper, where that's
it's their comfort zone as well. It's their comfort zone.
But additionally, going back to the too much information or even unnecessary information. So I liken this to snipers teaching a fucking carbine course, unless the guy obviously understands, that what he is teaching and he's demonstrated that he's not an idiot. I had a practical example of this. It was a medic, and I understood his intentions. However, when he actually went about teaching the class, it was like, look at this guy. And basically showing random pictures, making all of our stomachs fucking turn of various traumatic injuries. And then basically kind of questioning us and walking us through what you see, based on, the picture and how you would go about treating that based on the injury. The problem is it started to get into like cellular degradation and all this other stuff. And for practical, teachable C guys, I don't get anything from that. It'd be like me teaching a bunch of guys, external ballistics, even though they're all armed with carbines. Like they can use some of that information if I cherry pick it so it's selective, so they understand where it fits into their practical world. But when it's outside of that, why do I need to know this? Like you're just filling my head full of information that I really have, like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to turn it, and then maybe do some other minor things based on the external stimuli. But beyond that, like, that's beyond my training to understand and or act upon.
Right. So as instructors, you have to read your class, and Steve will verify this, and I'm sure everybody else will. You have to look at your class. What's the end user want? We talked about systems analysis and design earlier. I've got a bunch of studs on the line who work at, wherever, agency, group, unit. And I've got a bunch of civilians and some cops that were told to go there. They really don't want to go there. I have to be able to tailor what I'm teaching to the class. And sometimes, unfortunately, that means that you have to slow things down a lot for the lowest common denominator, the beginner shooter that's in your class, even though you have studs in the class. And you have to go to the studs and say, hey, look, bear with me. We're going to go over stuff you already know, but it's for the benefit of these other paying students. And while they're doing that, I'm going to cut you loose to do this because I know you can handle it. So a good instructor knows how to read the student population and adjust their POI or their training rhythm to accommodate everybody. But a lot of instructors have a hard time accomplishing that because they're so set in their ways. It's 11 o'clock, it's 09:30, and we should be at this point, this time hack on our POI. And if these, lowest common denominators aren't up to speed, that tough shit. I need to get done by lunchtime with this fucking, iteration. That's bullshit. I've had classes where I had a low light, no light class with pistol, And I had people in the class that shouldn't have been in the class. Wasn't my choice. And I had to adjust the class to accommodate those shooters. And I went to every other accomplished shooter and said, hey, look, sorry, it's outside of my purview and my control, but I have these guys in this class, and I'm going to need some understanding from you. We're going to have to slow things down a little bit. And at some time in the night, you guys go to work. So just, and they all understand. As long as you explain it as an instructor, you're never going to have any pushback, or hopefully you don't have any pushback, and they're on board with that. But it's imperative as an instructor to read the fucking class population and adjust accordingly. Most people have a difficult time doing that. Either it be ego, or, they don't know any better because they're not understanding of what they're doing, and they don't understand what they're trying to accomplish as an instructor. It depends on the instructor in the class, but that's important for instructors to understand. And it goes to beginning shooters acquire knowledge without fear of being outpaced by the better shooters.
Yeah, I'll agree with that wholeheartedly. The problem is you get into the puppy mill training, where it's exactly what you're saying. The POI at exact times, dates, everything is identical. I know factually that I may have a set of bullet points of instructions or things that we're going to touch on this day, whatever the case may be. And then by the time we hit lunch, even before lunch on day one, I realize that whole thing is out the window. And then I'm going to have to completely restructure based on everybody's skill sets that's there, that I've seen of 80 to 90% of the class versus 10%. And there's still ways to push that other 10% of the better shooters. But no two class are ever the same. Even though most of the instruction points are the same, the program has significantly changed. You either have to, let's just say it's a fundamental pistol class of whoever, and you've got 15 dudes on the line and 13 of them are hot shot studs. You're like, okay, I've got to push these guys a little bit harder and faster, but I have to get these guys up to a certain level. And a lot of times it may even be, hey, look, if you've got stuff here for lunch, which you should, let's just eat. We'll do some working lunch, get you guys ramped up a little bit further on, and bring you up to par or close to par as we can get you with these other guys. So they're not falling behind or whatever the case is. It's a difficult balance. And you know it as well as I do, Mike, and some of the other guys, that, you get those classes where you get people that want to, just because they've had 3 handgun 1 classes and they're ready to go, or they've taken 1 handgun 1 and like, I've been shooting all my life. So, hey, I'm ready for advanced Ninja Hondo roll flip 12. And they show up and they can barely get a gun out of the holster without muzzle sweeping their own hands.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Well, I mean, you and I were at the same class you remember when it rained like it was a hurricane? And I had to completely change the POI because we couldn't shoot outside. We had to go inside.
Yeah.
You have to be a good enough instructor to be flexible.
Absolutely.
That was a horrible class. I mean, it was a good class, but it was just like, holy shit, what are we going to do, right?
So much shit there. It's like, what are we going to do now?
Inside.
Yeah, inside, right? We're going to go inside. And, the funny thing was I had that 2 years ago in Alliance. It was just raining cats and dogs for a carbine class. We're ramping up on this 3-day package. I mean, miserable torrential downpours. And to the point where, most of the guys had good enough gear, clothing-wise to deal with it. I'm like, all right. But, now you're going to run into the problem of targetry. And you're not going to be shooting steel because you're going to destroy the range of steel with 5.56 at 15, 20 yards or whatever the safety concerns is. I sat there during a break between the night portion on day 2 going, what the hell am I going to do now? And I went, oh, I know. I took backers, traced out a target silhouette, cut out my scoring zones and did negatives with Coroplast target backers. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough.
Sure. Or you can, I was talking to Prime about this before we came online. Sometimes it's finding, the ability to do other things, not to fill time, but just to get points in. So, if it's fucking raining cats and dogs, inside the shoot house, we'll take Alliance as an example. Sure. You can work on footwork and just working the door and how you go down a hallway and how you cover each other. Yeah. There are other things you can delve into the flexible, knowledgeable instructor can look at the situation and the student population and go, hey, I can't do this now because all the targets are going to melt in the rain. Mm-hmm. And I can't do this because people don't have, the lickies and the chewies and the fucking comfort gear. Sure. But I can do this instead. So that reinforces other concepts I've currently, previously introduced. Mm-hmm. You and I know that a lot of instructors can't deviate from their game plan. Yeah. And so they're selling their students short.
No, exactly. I mean, it's like, I've got a specific package of, dry fire stuff we can do, or, dry reload drills or lectures, as well as I do, that we can dive into a really in-depth low light lecture that eats up 2 hours of time or 3 hours, whatever the case is. We know that we can pull other tricks out of the hat, so to speak, or the rabbits out of the hat, to at least give them more, or at least more information, whatever the case is. And a lot of guys can't do that. You're absolutely right. They've puppy milled it for so long. There's one instructor out there that I've trained with a couple of times who has a set POI to the minute. It's like, we are going to be shooting XYZ drill at XYZ time at blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow. And when I actually looked at his paper, his program, I was like, this is straight up military doctrine. We will be doing this at this time, this at this time, this at this time. And I'm going, you can definitely see where the influences came from. And having an instructor who has enough flexibility, either from a military, along with law enforcement side, or military civilian shooting, whatever the case is, they've got to be flexible enough to know when to deviate. They have to.
Right, which brings me up to another point that just has to do with liability. If it's something for in-service, or it's doctrine, or it's established POI, just from a liability standpoint, if you ever deviate from it for whatever reason, whether tornado came in or high winds, or you just can't do certain thing, you have to document it in your paperwork to protect your ass and to protect the department or unit's ass. You can always come back to something you skipped or missed earlier, or you can find other ways to work in what you couldn't do, but you still have to document it, because it needs to be established that this is why this happened. And I see instructors all the time, skipping shit that's necessary. And I'm like, hey, dude, are you going to fucking write this down in your fucking workbook? Or are you going to explain to the cadre why we can't do this, and the students why we can't do this? And then you have to go to higher and say, we had to skip this thing because we had fucking lightning. And everybody's carrying a fucking lightning rod. And a lot of people skip that process, and it ends up biting them in the ass later. So that's part of being flexible, is understanding that, you can drop certain things, but you have to document it and articulate it, for legal reasons.
Yeah, 100%. There's no way around it, especially when you're dealing with, obviously agencies, stuff like that. In some open enrollment classes, yeah, you could get around things a little bit better, because most of the guys are going to be like, oh, I'm wet, I'm cold, I'm miserable. We had a class one year, me and Chris, up in the Pacific Northwest, where we were both, coming off of a huge road trip. We both had pneumonia. We had students coming in from all over, including Hawaii, typical Pacific Northwest weather. It was wet for, 200% of the time. The temperatures dropped. It was getting cold. It was getting shitty. It was getting dangerous. And I literally, I pulled Chris aside. I'm like, look, this has got to go right now. We can't. No, we can do this now. And I called it. I called the class at like 2:00, because guys' hands were literally blue. You could see where it was getting dangerous. The guns were wet. Things were going to happen. And it was the right call. But being able to tell the students, hey, okay, listen, we've checked the forecast. The weather tomorrow is going to be XYZ. You guys mind showing up an hour earlier start time tomorrow? We'll get on it an hour earlier, and we'll get back into it. We'll stay an hour or so later. Whatever the case is, nobody's going to argue that when they've already paid money in that. But when you're dealing with, departments and agencies, man, it will bite you in the ass.
Yeah, that brings me to another point. As an instructor, it sucks to have to do it. And I know you're full of kit and stuff, and you loan stuff out, but as a good instructor, you have to have the comfort stuff, the lickies and the chewies and the extra fucking whoopee and the hand warmers and extra coffee. And just because some people don't know what they're delving into. They don't know how much of a sufferfest it can actually be. And if you don't have that shit in the back of your fucking SUV to support your class, you're wrong. I got it. Be accountable for your own shit. However, some people just don't know what they don't know. And, oh, fuck, I didn't realize I was going to need this, for like, we'll just take something simple, shoot house classes, chem lights or light markers.
Yeah.
Some guys don't get it. And they got the list of equipment to bring, and they brought the wrong shit because they didn't understand it's their first iteration through a shoot house. And so you have to have a box full of fucking chem lights and zip ties handy to sort these fuckers out so they can continue doing what they're doing. And you and I know that, but a lot of people aren't on board with that. They're like, well, it's their responsibility. I'm like, yeah, but they didn't know what the fuck they didn't know. Go ahead. Batteries. Batteries. Right, yeah. WD-40 pens to fucking clean lenses on their lights and shit, stuff to clean their glasses, an extra fucking set of gloves, hand warmers. Hey, I got a bag of Snickers in the car. You look fucking famished. You're hangry. Go fucking eat a Snickers, knucklehead. Or simple stuff like we're talking about instructor shit here, but working out in Casa Grande, right? In the summer, hot as fuck, on
the concrete.
Yeah, on the concrete, reflective fucking heat, radiant heat, guys in all their kit, trying to do too much. And I had to pull fuckers off the line. I mean, the entire line, and say, strip down to your fucking, basics and fucking hydrate. And I had a fucking pulse ox, and I'd fucking check everybody. I'd check the temperature, and I'd fucking make them hydrate. I'd take a safety pause and say, look, you fuckers are dragging. You're becoming fucking cognitively deficient because you're dehydrated. We're going to spend 30 minutes talking while you're hydrating, and get to it. And anybody that doesn't meet my fucking standards isn't going back on the line. So if you want to continue shooting, step up and fucking consume some fucking liquids.
Yeah.
Eat a couple fucking peanuts or something. I don't care, but you have to be ready to go back out there and work. Most people are like, oh, that guy needs to suck it up and do his shit. Fuck that bullshit, man. I don't want a dangerous guy on the line. You and I know that, but a lot of instructors don't quite fucking cotton to that crap or that concept.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I keep an extra set of rain gear packed in a backpack in the truck. There's an extra set of, whatever gear there's, I mean, I can't, well, as well as I do, how many tubs of Vitalite I've gone through over the years. You're always taking that shit to class because dudes show up with a bottle of Gatorade and a couple bottles of water. It's like, dude, that's not going to cut it,
Right.
Or they got 12 Mountain Dews with them and 6 cups. I had a guy this year in a class who, after lunch, I'm watching him and he's getting real shaky. I'm like, dude, what did you have to eat today? Oh, well, nothing. I had some more coffee. I'm like, yeah, okay, guess what? Go into the cooler, back in my truck. There's a bunch of fruit and snacks and some sandwiches in there. You're off the line. Go eat one of these, drink some of this, put that coffee shit away. I want you to pound down 2 bottles of water, mix it with this, and go. And then I'll put you back in the line.
Yeah.
But until then, dude, no. I'm not going to have it.
Yeah, and you and I both know that you can. So he's number 7 on relay 1. He needs to sit out. I can take the number 7 from second relay and swap him out. That's the flexibility we're talking about, and that gets people up to speed and keeps them interested and gets them the repetitions that they want. So, prime, we were people go to the same instructors, or they feel that primary and secondary is not doing anything different. Well, it's incumbent upon them to try to raise their own level. And as Justin was saying earlier, and some other people, Meckley and some other guys, you have to go out there and do something different. When you're programming for lifting weights, you do depending on what the program is, 6 to 8 weeks on a program doing certain exercises, then you deload and do something different. So, you go through Fisher's, protocols for a while, or my protocols, or Pat Mack's protocols or something. And you do those for a while, and then you downshift, you deload, which means you kind of back off a little bit. You continue to do it. That's reinforcement training, right? It's not pushing the envelope. And then you find some other instructor to go to, right? So primary and secondary, these people are saying, hey, it's not getting any better, or, it's not what it once was. No, they haven't deloaded and founded the second program. They haven't gone to a different level in their mind. They haven't found a different resource, or they're not reading the resources properly. We're going to get off instruction here for a second, but we'll take SITREP, which I kind of control or manage or whatever. They constantly push guys to go find different primary resources for information. If somebody's looking at RT or InfoWars for their fucking information on global events, that's all they see. That's the mindset they're going to have. I'm like, well, go look at this instead. This is what's going on in Turkey with the coup. This is what you're reading. Let me tell you why it's wrong. Why don't you go read this instead? It's the same thing when it comes to, Craig Douglas's stuff or Steve Fisher's stuff or anybody's stuff. You can hang out with one instructor or follow their philosophy for a while, but you need to go someplace else to horizons and have that stressor. It's not the successes that grow us, it's the failures. As Steve was saying earlier, it's doing wrong or feeling that you're outside your comfort zone. So if all you do is Steve Fisher Sentinel Concepts classes, Steve's a great instructor and he teaches great stuff, but he doesn't teach everything. And his perspective or his philosophy may not work for you as an individual. So you have to go to somebody else to learn. You have to come outside your comfort zone. You have to empty your teacup, or you have to not drink tea and drink coffee instead. And that's how you don't plateau. That's that nonsense of, well, primary and secondary is getting stale, or it's not what it once was. No, you're not looking for something else. That's on the end user. That goes back to systems analysis and design and how you acquire information and develop your cognitive skills. Mm-hmm. You have to do the work. You have to raise your level. So go to Steve for a while, and then go to Dave Harrington for a while, and Mike Pannone for a while, and Pat McNamara for a while. Go to Craig Douglas for a while. And then you can circle back, after a couple of years, and go back to Steve Fisher. People are inherently lazy. They want the instant answer because we're in a society where people want instant gratification. They don't want to put the work in. So when people say that, Matt, they're just not doing the work on their own time and their own dime to find something different to grow them. They're not finding an additional stressor to grow their, shooting muscle or their knife muscle or their cognitive muscle. If we're talking about SITREP, their situational awareness when it comes to world events or whatever, they have to do the work. It's not on you, it's on them. Does that make sense, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. Another aspect, though, is we have all these different resources. Sure, you are going to plateau at some point. If you're going to expect to get the same amount of information that you did in the past, you have to work a lot harder.
I think part of it is too, guys will plateau to a certain point, like Mike was saying about the instant gratification. They're looking for an immediate answer to something. Yep. And they're only looking at it from one perspective. It's what I kind of refer to in class with a lot of things, as well as, people are, their patterns and predictability. It's very easy to get caught in a pattern or be very predictable. And, guys, it's an echo chamber. Yeah, there is times it's an echo chamber because people are lazy. The electronic age has made people lazy with information. Truthfully, they look for it like, oh, well, I don't need to search it out. I'll just ask the damn question. You know what? It's probably been answered 1,253 times if you simply did a search for and it's part of that. It's also the fact that people aren't looking again to expand. They keep looking for, well, what's the latest, greatest gear that's going to do the best for me? That's going to make me a better shooter. What's going to make you a better shooter, dude? Spending, $300 on 2 cases of 9-ball and going to the range and doing some drills that are in the, tips, hints, and drill sections of primary and secondary. And then you can report back and say, hey, I've reached this point of this. What is my problem? Why am I not achieving these goals, or whatever the case is? It's just stop being lazy about it. Look for the information put it to application, put it to use, then come back and ask the questions. Yeah, the answers are there, but are your answers there? And it's kind of hard, I guess, for guys to deal with that. They don't look at things, they stay within a certain dimension, like Mike is saying. They just have to open up. I mean, it's like for me, right now, I seek out more information on current medical stuff, more current information on visual processing, more information on, performance. I mean, I start looking at other things now. Like shooting is shooting. There's bumping things on the gun and there's a lever that you pull back, and that's awesome. It's easy. It truthfully is. But when you start to dive into it even deeper to say, God, no, why are my split times this, or why am I not picking up this correctly on shooting multiples, or whatever the case is? You need to start looking for that information, seeking that shit out. And even as Mike was referring to, the sit rep stuff is amazing. If people cannot realize what they're seeing offshore from the United States that is currently happening, they're wrong, because these are precursors. They are indicators of what is here and what is to come. People need to open up their horizons a little bit more and expand on the information that is available to them outside of the shooting. Shooting is a 10% of the solution. Honestly, 80% of that is the pre-attack indicators, the awareness, the situational stuff. The other factor comes into being medical, and then the combatives. All those things come into that realm. But too many people are just lazy about it, and they think the gun is always the answer. So they're always looking for the gun answers. I don't know. It's the whole lead the horse to water thing.
Well, there's that. And then there's also a lot of people that are just absorbing this information and they don't have personal reference.
Well, they don't have a context or a frame of reference.
Context. There you go. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, Fisher kind of hit it on the head, and I'm sure Rick has some, thoughts on this, but if you look at anything, you have to put it within a frame of reference. You have to understand the context. Let's talk about the goal. I want to be good at protecting my house. There's a process to make you good at that. But what is the context? Are you worried about the fucking zombie horde, which is ridiculous? Or are you worried about, your wife and kids are at home, you're overseas. Do you want to get your wife and your kids spun up on protecting themselves in the house? Why are you looking at a process to go towards a goal? What is the context? What is the situational paradigm that you're working in? So the average, civilian shooter does not need to know how to, set up an L ambush. That's bullshit. And there's no, they're looking at a goal. I want to do an L ambush in my property so I can, save myself from the zombie horde. That's not necessary. What's necessary is to protect your property and your family from somebody breaking in, and doing something untoward. So what Rick has to deal with, that's a different frame of reference and different context than what, my neighbor has to deal with. And that's partially what drives the search for information, that context.
Absolutely. And I was just talking about this stuff last week, and the context, we're talking about certain tactics that, small unit tactics that we're using, and the context in it that certain assumptions are made when we are employing these tactics that gets glossed over a lot because that is at a higher decision level, or this is another echelon that you're not actually worried about. So guys learn these tactics like in the military, and they'll try to apply them to everything. And you got to stop and say, hey, look at the tactics that are being used in their totality of the situation. There's an assumption made. So if you're a 6-man reconnaissance element going forward and you're trying to employ your team, and you're setting them up as a leader, you're setting them up in a security posture when you should be having them closer together to where you can relay information and you can, relay back to the rear as per your job as a reconnaissance element. But you're not doing that because you're setting guys up for security. Why are you doing that? You learn that on the line because you are accustomed to using this tactic with the assumption that you have a larger follow-on force just to your rear. Well, as a reconnaissance element, you don't have that. So now you've got to adjust your tactics. And when you explain things that way to some people, the light bulb comes on, hopefully. But the assumption was already made and established, but it wasn't necessarily explained to you because you were at that point of it to where your function in this machine, your cog is spinning at this speed, and the other cogs are spinning at this speed, and you're not necessarily worried about what speed they're at as long as you do your function correctly. However, you take that as gospel truth and try to apply it to everything, and it doesn't work.
And that's the pitfall of not understanding context, and that's in some ways driven by cognitive bias. I don't need to worry about
Absolutely.
this. I don't need to worry about that. Well, no, that's not necessarily true, because what you're worrying about now may evolve into that thing you don't think you need to worry about. I'm protecting my castle here, and I'm only going to prepare for this because this is my context. This is my cognitive bias, when in actuality, something else may happen. So, when you're doing your learning, when you're acquiring knowledge process, you have to look at the entire picture. They can be subsets within a greater set, but you still have to deal with all of them. It's kind of what we talked about earlier, with Rick. Infantrymen have this skill set. It's this big set, but they're lacking in this one area. So go deal with that, but it still supports all the other subsets within that set. And, that comes to the context that you were talking about. Reconnaissance element does this. We were taught to do that. If you're doing this, as a reconnaissance element based on basic infantry skills, you're wrong because of this. It's the why. It's why do we do this? That's the context.
Exactly.
So what else, Prime?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I think I'm tapping out pretty close to midnight anyway.
Yeah, you got to take the kids out tomorrow.
Dude, it's 2 a.m. here where I'm at. I don't even want to hear it almost.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm up all night anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, just hopefully the arroyos aren't all washed out tomorrow and you guys can get out.
Yeah. Sleep is a rare occurrence around here these days, so I got to get it when I can.
Well, you have your own squad, dude. I mean,
It's true.
Yeah. Oh, man. They're putting the mileage on me, let me tell you.
Yeah, but it's worth it, man. You're a good dad, so keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or not.
So, yeah, or not. So, Matt, there's nothing else we need to cover. I mean, did we miss anything?
No. I have notes here. Everything appears to have been covered for this show.
So nobody messaged you and said we need to cover this or that or whatever.
No, actually, there was a question that came up, and I threw it at Steve right away, and he fielded it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm just going to throw a couple more things in here just really quickly. So as a student, right, you're going to a class, and you know what your goal is, and you understand the process of what you need to do. You understand how cognition works. You need to take copious notes. All right. You need to have a workbook and a logbook. And let me explain those for a second. And if Jedi were on here, he could really delve into this. It's more his thing than mine. But if I went to a Steve Fisher Sentinel Concepts class and I took copious notes and I was on board with the program and I made some strides, you have to go back home, and pretty soon after you get back home, you have to reinforce what Steve taught you based on your copious notes and the drills he gave you and the targetry that you shot on. You need to duplicate that. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier in short-term memory to kind of a temporary mid-term memory to get into long-term memory where you have this heuristic algorithm. Some people call it muscle memory, which is incorrect. In order to develop that mastery, you have to reinforce it. You have to have reinforcement repetitions of good skills, fundamentals. So one of my big pet peeves with students, or I'm out at the range or at the indoor range, and I just see people ballistically masturbating. They take a can of ammo out there and they just blast away. They don't have a plan of attack. What are they working on? They don't know. They just want to go out there and shoot ammo. They want to shoot their gun and look cool and all that crap. That's counterproductive. You need to have a plan of attack before you go to the range. So Steve has standards. We'll take Steve as an example. Steve has standards for his pistol. And you were in Steve's class and you took good copious notes and you know what the drills are. And you know where you were kind of weak and where you were strong. You're going to go out to the range, indoor or outdoor, and you're going to reinforce what Steve taught you by duplicating those drills. The first time you do the drills on your own, that's a baseline, right? So I'll use an even easier example, DEA dot torture drill, right? The first time you shoot it, that's your baseline. Keep the target, make notations. I did this wrong. This sucked. I had a problem with this. The second time you go out to the range, do the same drill. That's a data point. The more good repetitions or the more times you do the DEA dot torture drill, you have more data points from which you can make determinations on where you're lacking or where you're strong. Where you're strong, you don't have to reinforce quite as much. Where you're lacking or weak, you need to work on that. So you go to Steve's class, he has a certain set of standards and drills, you take copious notes, you go home. Pretty soon after you get back, go to the range and do what Steve taught you. Go back and duplicate what Steve instructed you on, but make documentation of it. So what I tell people to do is get a range book, log book, whatever, data book, determine the drills you're going to do for the day at the range, calculate the amount of ammo you need, add 10% just because malfunctions or whatever. Take that amount of ammo, do those drills, then fucking leave. Because anything after that is ballistic masturbation and you're at the point of diminishing returns. You need to know what you're going to do. What's your goal going to the range? What's the process towards going towards the goal? Anybody that just takes a can of ammo out there and loads their magazines up and fucking blasts away, they're not learning anything. They're at cross purposes to what they're trying to learn. So if you're a student, you should understand that. As an instructor, you should advise that. That makes sense, Matt and Rick, or no?
Absolutely.
So wholeheartedly agree.
That's a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Same here. And for me personally, it's gotten to a point where if I can't even go out there and just blast away like that. I might as well just take money and just light it on fire, in my mind. But I just can't do it. I have zero enjoyment out of it. If I'm not like doing something that has a purpose, if I'm not progressing somehow, or, trying something new, something to better myself somehow with my shooting, I can't do it, man. It just sucks. It's gay.
So Zach, that was my last kind of comment. Does that cover everything, Matt? I just want to make sure we're done here.
One aspect I'm surprised you didn't talk about was how, it's fun to do the easy stuff, but to really advance and get better, you need to do the crappy stuff as well.
What, like malfunction clearance drills or what?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I kind of touched on that a little bit. I mean, people that go to the range want to do the easy stuff because it's a level of self-gratification,
Yep.
And it makes you feel like you're king of the world and all that crap. You have to work on, we talked about variables and constants. You have to work on the hard stuff. It's hard for a reason. It may take more time to set up. It's more complicated to do. It requires more work. You have to slow down and really focus on your repetitions. But you may be able to shoot like a house on fire, but what if you're shooting like a house on fire and you have a malfunction on your pistol and you don't know how to clear it? Or you know how to clear it, but then you're over revved and you get the pistol back to working and you make crappy hits after you cleared the malfunction. So you have to, we talked about stacking and grouping. You have to work those groups, right? You have to introduce difficulty into what you're doing in order to overcome the difficulty. This kumbaya, everybody gets a fucking, first place trophy crap doesn't work. You, like I said earlier, you grow from the stressors. You grow from your failures. When you overcome your failures and you learn how to overcome them, you become better. If everything is easy, when you're introduced to a problem you don't know how to solve, you're going to fucking fail. So people that are out there that are just going out there to shoot, hammer pairs at 3 meters, what happens when you have to take a shot at 15 meters with your pistol by a patrol car? You practice that. It sucks to set up, but have you practiced it? Have you worked, solo on a county road doing a felony traffic stop? Doing those repetitions in service, they're hard to set up. They're boring. They're a pain in the ass. But you need to know how to do them, because when you're, on Highway 80 in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska and you're the only deputy in the county working that part of the county, if you do it wrong because you didn't practice the hard stuff, you're going to get shot in the fucking face.
Yep. So
you have to do the hard stuff. I'm not saying don't do the fun stuff. That's fun. Great. That 10% of ammo I told you about, no malfunctions, you know what? Do a mag dump. Whatever makes you feel good. But that's when you're done doing your process. That's when you're done doing your personal POI for the day on the range. So, Rick, he's got a group of dudes out there and they're working, KD range, and they're working 50 meters and in with their carbines, and they have an allotment of ammo and they need to consume it before they are done with their stuff and turn all the crap in and account for it at the armory and, pick up all their fucking brass and turn it in, all that shit. He's got a little bit of time left over, some ammo left over. He's gonna let the guys loose because hey, guess what, guys? You did hard work. Congratulations. Here's some fun shit. Let me set up a fucking drill for you guys so you can just have fun. You deserve it, right? You have to be able to do that too, but that's only after the hard work, right? It's earning your calories if you're doing it smart when you're working out. I want to eat fucking coconut cake at this wedding next weekend. That means that I'm going to have to work my ass off this week before the weekend so I earn those coconut cake calories at the wedding. Or I'm going to go to this wedding. I've been really hard this week. It's this next weekend. After that wedding, I'm going to have a good time because it's life. But the following week, I'm going to have to crack down and really work hard because I fucking did something that wasn't so good for my body. Same thing when it comes to shooting or defensive tactics or combatives or knife skills or, working on unit tactics or anything. You have to do the hard stuff, but sometimes you have to reward it with the fun stuff. So, does that kind of cover what you were driving at, Matt, or what?
Yeah, exactly.
Rick, you want to jump in?
No, I agree. Just like it's a scenario you talked about, we have a little bit of ammo left over. I love doing things like, okay, now we're just kind of like a little friendly team competition and make it fun.
Where you shoot each other?
Yeah. The loser gets to stay here on the range. Winner goes home. But yeah,
well, yeah,
things like that.
Well, and sometimes it's a good thing. I mean, Rick, you can have a competition, and the team that wins doesn't have to fucking clean the range, right? I mean, sometimes those stressors push guys in the envelope. I mean, when you're instructing, you have to push the envelope to some extent, but you don't want to push too hard because you're going to lose guys. They're not going to focus and learn the skill or the fundamental.
Oh, absolutely. Right? And yeah, it's a little bit different crowd. I mean, just like we talked about before, knowing your crowd, knowing the group of guys, like I have an advantage because they're all, selectees. They're multiple volunteers. And
right.
For the most part, they're all go-getters and type A personalities. So they want to do stuff like that. But that goes back to absolutely knowing your crew and knowing who you're working with and the condition that they're in. I wouldn't, if it was a super long ass whipping weekend or period of instruction or whatever it is we got going on and they're just pooped, and they're not going to get anything out of it, then yeah, like we talked about earlier, you just got to make that call and be like, all right, this is pointless. No,
yeah, I mean, so you got dudes, stalking in shitty weather for a week, and they've got to get their hits and not get dinged and whatnot. And they've done well, and they busted their ass, and they learned their skills, and they reinforced their skills. Sometimes as an instructor, it doesn't matter, making an apple pie, sniper stuff, right? Or Steve's basic pistol class. Sometimes you just have to say, hey, we're done. You're not going to absorb any more information. You plateaued out for this class, this iteration, this FTX. And so let's just fucking clean up and get the fuck out of here, right? Because you're not going to absorb anything else. We're at cross purposes here. That law of diminishing returns. You have to know as an instructor or as a student sometimes, hey, we can't do this anymore. We're done. And a good student will know their limit. I want to be pushed as a student, but if I've got a jacked up hip or something, I'll give you an example. Doing a firearms instructor class. And we had a student in the class who had a neurological condition. And he had this horrible wobble because of his neurological condition. And I didn't try to fix it because he was getting good terminal hits. I worked on his learning process so he could go back to his agency and teach. And he ended up being a good instructor. But at some point, as a student or as an instructor, you have to know these are the limitations of what we have in place, and we have to work around it and make exceptions. Good instructors do that. A lot of instructors don't. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Rick. At some point, hey, look, we're done. Let's get out of here. Let's do an after action report and do loose rounds and have commentary. What did you learn? What did you not learn? What did you want to learn that we didn't teach you? And let's make notation of that for the next time, and let's get the fuck out of here, because at some point you just can't do anything else.
Yep. Agree 100%.
Is that it, Matt? Did I miss anything?
Yeah. I do think the first time I was introduced to the concept of a fatigue shooter isn't going to learn anything is from you. And that
they're not.
No, they're not. But yeah, having just gone through smaller, little tiny courses, law enforcement stuff, that's never anything discussed.
Well, no,
and when
because
we're really talking about performance and truly trying to learn, it just makes sense.
I mean, we could do another modcast sometime. We could get deeper into that, but there's a whole science to how people. I mean, I kind of covered it, but there's a whole science to how people learn shit. Mm-hmm. And as an instructor, and as an agency or a unit or whatever, this kind of applies to Rick too. You have to know. I mean, Rick was kind of talking about it earlier with NCOs. An NCO is stuck in his ways. You want to have better NCOs. Introduce them to cognitive sciences. I want to make, and here's the thing. I mean, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but you can flatten learning curves out greatly just by understanding how people acquire information. Okay, let me ask you a question, you guys, the two people that are left. What's the average attention span of a human adult, all things being good? You got enough sleep, you ate well, you had enough coffee, you got laid, whatever. What's the average attention span of a human adult?
7 minutes.
No, I mean, when you're actually focusing on something, it's about a half an hour, give or take. Okay.
But wait, what were you saying?
Well, I mean,
no, that was a joke.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're interested in the topic,
yeah. So
Rick is teaching, basic ballistics, and these guys are alpha males, and they're all on board with the program, and they're focusing, and they're taking notes, and they've got their dip in, they have their coffee or their rip in or their fucking monster. They're there, right? They're there intellectually. About half an hour. So if you're in a college class, Matt, you're in college. Watch the students at the half an hour mark and see if they're looking at their watch or they're looking at the wall clock. That's about when they tend to drift off. That's when they lose their focus. So as an instructor, if you're smart, you don't do any block of instruction more than 30 minutes, because that's just general when people lose their attention span. right? You build all of what you do around 30-minute blocks, and you give them a small 5 to 10-minute break. And it can be an instructive break. You can say, hey, we're working on this while you're taking your piss break and your coffee break. Anybody that wants to stick around, we can talk about stuff, or, hey, make notes or whatever. But you have to give them that mental pause in order for them to process the information you just threw at them, right? So,
yeah.
We're talking about Rick and his guys, as a good NCO, if you want to flatten the learning curve, if you understand how cognitive acquisition actually works, when you're building your POI, right, you will be able to get guys more on board with things, and they'll absorb more information more quickly, as opposed to doing a death by PowerPoint for 2.5 hours on ballistics. If you break it into 30-minute blocks and give them coffee and pee breaks, let them come back, and then go over and review what you previously introduced in the 30-minute block a little bit. This is the grouping thing. And then go on to the next topic. Hey, remember when we talked about it in the first thing before your pee break? We were talking about, these how ballistics work. This is what happens when you shoot M855 through an M4. Here's basic ballistics. Now let's talk about what happens when you shoot at a further distance M855 through M4. We're still covering the same ballistic concepts, but we're going to introduce distance. Right. So you're reinforcing the first block with the second thing. We've kind of talked about this previously, but if as an instructor, if you get in there and do your own work, just like a student, as an instructor, you have to be a student, you can flatten that learning curve out. Does that make sense, Rick?
No, absolutely. I do try to do that. And I didn't even really think about the 30-minute time, but it just tends to be about how it is. And when you start seeing guys that drifting a little bit, and just being able to read them and saying, hey, all right, we need to get up, let's take a piss break. And then later on, when we're applying it on like the practical exercise, whether it's being on the range shooting or something like that, and you see the light bulbs that go on, and they're like, oh, all right. Like, all right, cool. So we're starting to learn this, and now we can start building on the next lesson and furthering that.
Well, and then let me say something in addition to that. So you're on the line, you've got your kids doing sniper stuff, and you see that they're not fatigued and they're still focused. You don't have to stop at 30 minutes. They're still a captive audience. Their gears are still working. So you can push a little bit longer. That's a good instructor can fucking look at a class and say, hell, fuck, I can do another, in my grouping, I can do another repetition of malfunction clearance drills because these guys aren't fucking drifting, right? But that's hard. And let me tell you, that takes a lot of time as an instructor. There are guys that hang their shingle out. Oh, I was, an OIF and I did this at, wherever, and I know what the fuck I'm doing. That's great. Merry Christmas, But you don't know how to fucking teach yet. You haven't mentored under somebody. I had 2 phenomenal mentors, Bill and Pat. Bill taught me the LE side and how to be a good instructor, how to develop a lesson plan, how to test people, how to develop metrics, how to communicate. And then Pat taught me all the other stuff. Pat didn't let me run a line for a long time. And then he finally was like, yeah, go ahead and I'm going to take a break, or I'm going to shoot the line or whatever. Fucking run this thing. Because he trusted me. But I fucked up when I started. I was nervous. I stammered. I didn't have a vocal presence. I had no command voice. I had no individuality. I parroted Pat a lot. And then I deviated from that because I got confidence. That takes time under good instructors.
And then from then on, Mr. Grumpy was born.
Well, I was only grumpy when I'd go to a fucking range and it wasn't prepared like that was supposed to be. Went to this place in Ohio one time, freezing our balls off, shitty weather. And they'd had a competition the day before, and they had all this fucking steel on our fucking range. And the guy that was supposed to move it with the fucking forklift tractor fucking implement wasn't around. And they didn't have the fucking targetry stands. They didn't have the fucking fucking labs. They didn't have the fucking backers. And so I had to fucking construct a range out of nothing, out of the back of my truck. And it took me 5 fucking hours. Pat was done with lunch and still doing fucking lectures, and I still didn't have the range up on TD1, you know? And that's why I got grumpy. Or, you know, we're supposed to shoot on this range, and we get set up on a range that's fucking like shooting on the moon. It was like a lunar surface, uphill, you know, 15% incline. Can't fucking shoot on that range. You have to work around that shit, you know? Anyway, that's why I was grumpy. Not because of the students, just because of fucking range shit.
No, it was cool when we figured out, hey, that Mike guy, he's actually really cool. I just need to talk to him. Don't be scared.
Well, I'm a pussycat, dude.
Oh no, I know that. that.
I'm actually so laid back on the range. It's not even funny, you know. Anyway, yeah. So Rick, I mean, you know, 30-minute blocks work. You know, read the atmosphere of the class or the focus of the class, and just kind of adjust a little bit one way or the other. And you know, you'll be fine. I mean, I know you know this, but a lot of guys that work in your area, you know, Big Green, not necessarily individualized things like sniper. You know, they just want to get through the package so they can get guys safe and so they don't shoot each other. And that's all they want to teach. They don't want to fine tune things, you know?
Yeah, no, I hate that.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I mean, I did a package with Pat at Pendleton, and we had Mr. Grumpy, right? So they didn't have enough fucking target stands. So I fucking, out of 2x4s and screws and shit, I built a fucking mock-up. And I said, this is how you do it. Dimensions, number of screws, how much long. I mean, I gave them all the shit or they needed, right? And Freddie Bush can fucking, you know, verify this shit. So we get out there in the first day, and there are no fucking built target stands, right? And so how the fuck are we going to teach a class without target stands? We can't do it. It's just not going to fucking happen. So we worked it out. I mean, we had to fucking, you know, as the people from New Zealand, the Kiwis say, we souvenired some fucking target stands from nearby ranges. We had a working party fucking go steal some shit. But, you know, it turned out to be a big pain in the ass. And working with the Marine Corps, it could be the Army, it doesn't matter. You know, you get out there and you have this huge fucking group of students and you have a cadre of instructors, and you have to be able to figure out how to do what you need to do within a certain time frame, regardless of the obstacles. Some people can't fucking do that. So, you know, Rick, all kudos to you. I mean, you get it, but a lot of people in the larger institution that you're working in, they don't fucking grasp the concept of what they need to do to get their guys spun up. They just don't get it.
Yep, it's true.
Meckley, you want to say anything?
No, I'm in that. I think I did like, and I can do a better one that's a little bit more free when I'm home. But that one of the videos for Miller with the, you know, just going over basics of tack reload and speed reload, loading an M4, that kind of thing. Yeah, I did like 6 cuts in the video, and I wasn't even happy with it just because I'm still at that kind of stage where it's a difference of standing up in front of your peers and teaching them something is a little easier because you can read that crowd, you understand that crowd's little tells, but then doing it to an unknown audience or people you do not know at all is kind of daunting at first. Especially when you're really trying to not sound like an idiot.
Yeah, but I mean, I use myself as an example. I mean, you're going to suck when you first start, and hopefully you have a mentor. I mean, so Rick's got, you know, he's a good instructor for what he does, and he's got some young stud underneath him who's going to be a good instructor, and you have to lead him down the path. You have to be a mentor or a guru to him and say, hey, look, this is what I do. Watch me. Okay. And then you see that he's paying attention. He understands what you're talking about. And then, 6 months later, you're like, hey, I want you to teach this block of instruction. You hover on his shoulder a little bit like an angel. And you're like, hey, that was pretty good, but next time try it this way. Or you're too quiet. Or, hey, you missed this point. Let's cover that on the lunch break. Right. That's a good mentor. That's a good instructor of instructors. And it's hard, when you're with your peers, when you're out there with your snipers, that's great, Rick, but teach something to non-snipers that's sniper, applicable. You're not used to that crowd and you might be tenuous and uncomfortable. That's how you grow. That's that stressor we're talking about. That's getting outside your comfort zone. That's how you grow. You're in primary and secondary and you think it's stale. Well, go look someplace else, acquire a different skill set. Hey, you're great running a pistol. Merry Christmas. How are you putting on a tourniquet? Have you done that yet? That might apply, or how about you're great at running your carbine, but you suck at transition from carbine to pistol. Maybe you should work on that. There's no reason anybody that's acquiring knowledge should ever be stale. It's inexcusable. It's not acceptable.
Well, then kind of to parody what Mike was saying, the one thing I noticed, at least as a personal development aspect of myself, that was a big shift when I was in the military was, for a while, I had some good NCOs and I had some bad ones. But for the most part, a lot of them were that micromanaging type where, I'm like, I'm a peacock, gotta let me fly kind of guy. Like if you don't give me that confidence and that trust, I just kind of shut down. I'm like, okay, fuck you then. I'm not going to work to that next level because my work's going to fall on deaf ears. But the big shift was when who's a friend of mine now, and he's out, came from group and then took over our section. He was the guy coming to me because he'd been to SODIC like many moons ago, and a lot of that was kind of fuzzy. He was the guy coming to me for advice and for, technical knowledge because I was up to date on all that stuff. Having somebody, especially for your subordinates, having somebody place a little bit of trust and confidence in somebody can have a huge net benefit, especially if they're, like myself, where I'm more of a naturally introverted kind of guy. Shocker. But if you see that kind of a guy kind of withdrawing into his shell, give him something to do and show that you've got that kind of trust in his ability. And sometimes you'd be surprised, man, like that can have just as much of a positive effect as, correcting the type A guy and making him kind of use his personality against him to get him to do what you want.
So Rick, how do you deal with that?
I mean, shit, just by nature, I have to delegate a lot because of a couple of different hats that I got to wear. And just currently, because we don't have any sniper employment, NCOs or sniper employment officers. So I'm kind of wearing 3 hats right now, and I'm possibly getting ready to wear a 4th. So, having my team leaders running training and just giving them that long leash to do things that they should be able to do, but I see the confidence inspired in them when I do that and say, hey, you guys know how to run this. This is what I need. My 2 end goals for this is this, and I need the guys to do this by such and such time, man. I know you guys got it. If you run into any snags, let me know. If it's something that like needs to get pushed up, let me know. I got to be over here doing this or putting this fire out. And that's how guys learn. I've seen just over the time that I've been the section leader, growth in my 3 team leaders. And I do feel that like I wish I had more time. I always wish I had more time, but developing my team leaders, getting them ready to be section leaders themselves is something that like lately I've really tried to buckle down on and stuff because when I first got to this section, we were really low on qualified personnel. And so the emphasis that I decided I wanted to go with it was a section was, all right, getting our Joes, our E4 below guys qualified up. And then, once we get that baseline of knowledge going, trying to develop the team leaders at the same time, but then really focusing on the team leaders, and it's a cyclical thing. There's never a time where we're good enough. We can stop training now or stop, pushing, but I'm starting to try to transition to that point where I can kind of start focusing a lot more on the team leaders and letting the team leaders train their guys up, because we're starting to get ahead of the curve in terms of being having sniper school qualified personnel, which is really good. I'm proud as fuck of the guys, and they've been doing great things. And but yeah, subordinate development, professional development is an ongoing thing always. So, and again, it goes back to what we're talking about, these plateaus that we're trying to break through. I want these guys to be a better section leader than I ever was, and I'm just trying to give them the tools that they can take and just expand on and run with, and hopefully if everything works out, that'll be the end state once I'm done with my time in the section, which they're gonna claw me, pull me away, kicking, screaming, and clawing from the job. But at the same time, I look at my subordinate team leaders, and I'm like, man, these guys are going to do good things. So, when I become old and irrelevant, I need to get my ass out of the way.
Yeah, you're not going to be irrelevant. But let me ask you another question. So from a leadership standpoint, as an instructor standpoint, you have guys in your cadre, right? And one guy's really good at ballistics, and one guy's really good at stalking, and one guy's really good at instructing camouflage. Do you let those guys just handle that, or do you try to cross-train them and try to build up their weaknesses into strengths? So when you send your subordinates out and you're teaching a package in the pipeline, do you have, Joe deal with ballistics because he's a master at it? I mean, you obviously want to master teaching something important, but at the same time, do you want to, as the guru, as the team leader, as the head instructor, do you also want to build his other skills and bring his level up? I mean, how do you deal with that problem? Because it happens everywhere.
No, absolutely. I do. And in fact, so if time allows those guys that are weak on something, because, you always learn something better when you teach something. You always walk away from, if you're teaching the class, guys will want to dig up, some of that knowledge. Maybe they had it at some point and they got to go back and check their notes, hit their books, whatever. And so, teaching something that they're weak in, I find can bring their skill set or at least reinforce that skill more every time they teach it. Do I capitalize on their strengths? Absolutely, of course. But just like you said, bringing them up to the level of being proficient and working with those weaknesses to turn them into strengths. That is something I do. I try to have guys that hey, he's not too experienced in this. Hey man, I'm going to task you with teaching this subject for this long. Dig into it, get spun up on it. And if you got any questions, obviously let me know. If I don't have those answers, I'll get them to you. But once those guys do that, and like I said, after teaching it, they tend to hold on to it longer. And so it does elevate their understanding of it and their skills overall, I think.
So let's talk about problem solving. So you have guys that are weak in an area. Let's talk about just the guy that's weak on ballistics, and you have a stud that's amazing on ballistics, and you have the flexibility and the resources. Let's just take your guys as an example, your training cadre and you would, as a good instructor, head instructor, would you take over a training block and pair the weak guy with the strong guy and have the strong guy mentor the weak guy, or would you mentor the weak guy and take over that training block? You get where I'm driving at?
Yes. No, I would supervise from a distance, but let the strong guy train the weak guy on it.
Okay.
I would like, if there's something in particular that I don't know, maybe he's being glossed over, or maybe the guy's really strong at it. He knows it really well, but he's struggling to articulate what he knows. I know that he knows it. He might be struggling to articulate it to the weak guy. I might jump in and try to help him out a little bit, but I would prefer that the guy that's strong in it teach the weak guy, and I kind of stay a little bit in the back. I don't want to micromanage too much unless it's something that, like I said, if he's struggling a little bit, I'll just give him a little pointer, maybe explain something a little bit better that he's struggling with. But I try to work it that way if I can.
Okay, I was just curious because that's good leadership, and that's a good way to do cognitive acquisition. Is, hey, look, bro, you're a little slow in this, and maybe you should work with Bob here because he's the expert. He's really good at this or whatever. And I'll jump in where I have to, but I'm not going to get in your way. It's like what I was talking about working with Pat. I struggled initially. And Pat would say something to me, and I fucked up a couple times, and he chewed my ass. He's like, "Hey, that sucked. Do it this way next time." Okay. And then he immediately make me go out there and do it again. So he was a good mentor in that application of learning how to teach a class. So again, good on you because you kind of get it, but a lot of people just don't fucking grasp that concept that, hey, look, this guy's struggling, we'll let him fucking drown. That's bullshit. Look, the other thing I'm a big proponent of is that what we teach is a legacy, and if you're not striving to pass along a legacy to the people under you that are not quite as qualified as you, you have to bring them up to your level at some point because you're going to disappear at some point. You're going to get shifted to another command or another agency, or you're going to retire. The guy that replaces you has to be just as qualified as you. So if you're not training that person to replace you, what good are you? You're not passing along that legacy. What we do is a legacy. So primary and secondary is trying to pass along legacy concepts. Hey, we're going to, have Bill Blower show you how to do this. This is why he does it. This is applicable to you at your unit or your agency because of this. Take this information to where you work and pass it along. And it's like dropping, if you're shitty at it, it's like dropping a grain of sand into a big fucking ocean. There's no effect, right? If you're really good at it, it's like dropping a boulder into a small duck pond. Everybody feels the ramifications. The second and third order effects of what you teach is significant. If what you teach is minimal, it's like that grain of sand in the ocean. If what you teach is applicable and important and you do it well, it's like dropping that boulder in the duck pond. So, a lot of people don't grasp that concept. It is a legacy. When I do the firearms instructor blocks, I'm like, what I'm teaching you is not for me. It's for you to take to where you work. And how I teach you is so that you can teach those guys. And when you retire, if you do it right and you teach it properly, what you teach them will trickle down or ripple out to the people that you teach. So it's a continuing education experience. It's a cycle of excellence that they can acquire and pass on. And that's what primary and secondary is striving to achieve. So when people say it's stale, again, I've covered this before, they're not looking. They're not trying to be the big boulder in the duck pond, right? They're not saying, how can I be more effective in my learning acquisition or my instruction? They just want to fulfill their own little, ego need. Oh, I learned this, I can go do my thing now. No, you can't. You haven't done this for 10 years. You haven't worked under this guy. you haven't put your time in. You haven't failed. You haven't sucked. You haven't improved from why you sucked. Why did you suck? Because of this, this, and this. Well, how do you fix that? That's a process. Anyway. Meckley,
No, I hear you. Yeah. And you know, my goal when I got to the section, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be there forever, you know, or I should say got to the section as a section leader. I want, my number one goal is to leave those guys, you know, that are going to be running it one day. I want them to be better than me. I don't just want them to be qualified. I don't want mediocrity for them. And, I mean, I want all of my guys to like surpass anything I've ever taught them. That is something that like if I could see that would just, you know, I would be thrilled. That is my number one goal. It's like, I want these guys not just to be on my level, qualified or whatever. I want them to be better. I want better for them because they deserve it, you know? And that's what I think of when I think of like training these guys, you know?
And that's why you're exceptional at what you do, because you have that attitude, right? I mean,
but there's a big difference between training guys, and you see this a lot in the military, at least I did, where it's, you have a couple of the guys that are training it not for their net benefit, you know, to basically go look at what I can do, or to show off their guys to better their image. You know, is more of a self-centered goal. There's a difference between, or I think somebody coined it to me a while back. I think it was on Lightfighter. It was like, one of the best NCOs you can have are the guys that are the guys that have got experience and a healthy dose of survivor's guilt. Meaning their primary motivation is not doing it specifically because they want to make themselves look good, you know, on the surface, make their guys look like they're studs. They want to do it because they recognize where things fell apart for them in their experience, and they want to correct that and make sure it never happens again. Like the articles that the 82nd's putting out for their Master Sergeant stuff, that stuff took me hours and hours out of my life and thousands of dollars over the years, going to courses, talking to people, you know, shooting, all that stuff, trying stuff out so I can actually kind of articulate my points. But they don't realize like that kind of stuff. There's a reason why we want to preserve it, because it's so easy to go away once, you know, for example, GWAT winds down. How much have you seen an attitude shift in a lot of guys, especially newer NCOs, maybe that hadn't deployed yet, now that GWAT's no longer looming on the horizon? And that needs to be resisted at all costs. I don't know, I kind of started from one place and ended up in a completely different spot, but hello?
No, you're good, man. We all
yeah, I find it irritating when guys are more about either demonstrating how smart they are, you know, up in front of a class to feed their own internal ego, or, you know, just trying to do as much of the bare minimum, but on the outward it looks awesome. You know, there's a difference between those guys and the guys that are out there working with their guys and genuinely concerned about their skill levels, not just checking the box to make themselves look good in front of the commander or the platoon leader.
Yeah, so I did a thing one time with some National Guard guys, right? And the CO and the XO were fucking amazing. We were at a shitty place. The weather sucked. We had fucking long rifle being a pain in the ass as far as range safety and just fucking rules. And the XO and the CO, no, not Pendleton. The XO and the CO were all about, you know, private conversation off to the side, away from their troops. We're like, hey, do what you need to do. We want our guys to go over there and come home. We want our guys to go do their job and get back to their families and their kids. You know? So do what you do. Ignore our bullshit. If you need any support, here's our fucking don't go through the fucking switchboard. Don't fucking talk to our adjutant. Here's our fucking cell phone numbers. Fucking call us. Which was fucking refreshing, you know? I mean, you got a brigadier general who's like, hey, bro, basically, you got any problems? I'll sort the shit out because I want my guys to come home. I want them to go with the skills that allow them to do their job. And I want them to be spun up in such a way that they can do their job and come home successfully, you know? And that's completely, not completely, it is unusual to see that. It's not, hey, you know, we're going to do what we do because we're checking the box. You know, here's the shooting pipeline. Our guys did it. Now they're going to go spin off Oconus and do their shit, and then you know, hopefully they come home. That's not the attitude they have. They're like, hey, give them the survival skills they need to do work and get back here, and ignore all this fucking extraneous bullshit that we normally have to do because what you're teaching them is relevant. You know, I mean, I had a problem with fucking weapons, right? They fucking had shitty fucking training M4s and shitty M9s, and they were going down all the time. And so I dialed up the phone and said, hey, can I see you at lunch? Just, you know, if you have time. And dude rolled up in his car and he's like, what's up? And I said, hey, look, you need to call the armorer and have extra fucking weapons here. Why? Because these suck. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, they're training. I mean, I got keyholes on the targets. You know, the barrels are shot out. So I can't get good training blocks with these shitty weapons. Some of them are fine. But I can't fucking download the line and do a third relay because you can't supply good weaponry. So I can either loan stuff, right? Or I can work on stuff, but I'm, you know, technically not allowed to do that. Or you can have the armorer drop off some extra shit from, you know, the armory, and I'll log everything and then log it. I'll be accountable and responsible. I explained it to the guy because, well, you know, he's the fucking CO. He's like, okay, I get that. And he fucking got on the phone and fucking called somebody. And sure enough, here comes a fucking dude and got some extra shit, just spares. That's fucking unusual. But he was concerned not about, like Meckley saying, hey, ego driven. I got these guys through the pipeline. Now they can go do their shit. He was like, I want these guys to come home and survive. It blew me away, you know? Anyway.
Good shit.
No, I mean, it was refreshing, you know. It just, I mean, Pendleton was kind of the same way. These guys are like, what do you need? How can we fix this? How can we help you? You know, there's a problem. What do we do to fix it? It wasn't, this is the way we do it. Fucking do it our way. It was like, hey, we hired you for a reason. Do your job, and hopefully these guys will be better at what they do. I kind of like that. You know, I've been other places, and it's like, you're going to do it our way. You're going to teach our POI. Okay, Merry Christmas. But, you know, when you're fucking eating donuts and drinking coffee, I'm going to sneak some shit in here because it's, you know, survivability.
Yeah, bringing an outside instructor and you're going to teach to our POI beyond basic, like, hey, these are regulations that we have to follow for specific safety stuff on this particular range. You know, you can't get any way around that. You make adjustments to your POI. Got it. But like expecting them to basically say, here, teach this is like, holy balls.
I mean, I got lateral limits and fucking, you know, ammo that you can shoot on certain targets, and here are the no shoot areas on the shoot house, and, you know, here's the PPE you have to. I got all that shit. But you hired somebody for a reason. You know, they're SMEs to some extent, hopefully. Fucking let them do their job. So when I did, you know, Pendleton, and when I did this other place, you know, I was kind of, you know, it was refreshing to see these, you know, leaders in their leadership positions concerned about their kids down to the privates. You know, hey, look, this guy's been through our package. Let's have him do your package. What do you need in, you know, in regard to support? What is difficult for you? You know, what is an obstacle for you teaching this thing that you're teaching? Well, you know, you're fucking long range motherfucker over here. Your range safety fuck Nazi won't let us do this. Fuck that. I'll call him and tell him to fuck off. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Bye. You know, I know that's unusual, but it was nice to see it.
Yeah, man. I can't say enough about guys like that. No,
So,
go
like,
ahead, man.
going back
I'm
to
just, yeah.
going back to what you said about asking I got an example of what not to do relative to like systems analysis. What you were talking about earlier, Mike, asking the subordinates what that needs to be improved, or maybe asking them for constructive criticism, or just asking them for feedback first before you go higher with it. I wish there was more of that instruction and mindset for a lot of the staff level in a lot of battalions and brigades, because an example, I don't even want to contemplate how much of our battalion funds that we could have spent on gear that we actually needed, and maybe some extra training or extra ammo, or however they could have allocated those funds. But we ended up buying, and I didn't find out until like the last month of my last deployment, these bullshit shirts that had that cool mesh that kind of like that has air in it, so it allows air to circulate underneath, 2 layers kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of a stiff. Well, they ended up buying like combat shirts, enough for the entire battalion, with this cool mesh stuff. And we had IOTV, so it was even worse, because the actual bulk of the system and then the bulk of the IOTV would have made, it'd be like the kid from, the kid dressed up by his mom in Christmas Story. Like, I can't put my arms down. But they bought all of those for the whole battalion. I never could find out where they bought them from, but they sat in a Connex and never got issued to anybody. And I'm amazed that they're not thinking about like, oh, maybe we could have done better, instead of or asking the people below them, what do you need? Not here, here's a bunch of shit you do not, or you didn't even ask for. And it was all a knee jerk after they got back from JRTC, because I'd gone to sniper school instead of going to JRTC, which thank God. I didn't even know they'd been ordered until like that last month. I opened up a Connex, because you're doing that, getting ready to go back, and you look in, you're like, what are all these boxes? I don't even want to know how much thousands of dollars we threw down the toilet, and there was no perceptible gain for it. It's not even gear too. You could have brought in a shooting package. You could have got in touch with AWG and brought them in to do shooting packages for your entire battalion. Like, there's resources within the military they could have harnessed, and it just never happened.
Well, and that's, when you have large institutions, so like Big Green or, Big Blue or something, everything's driven by policy decisions that are dictated to some extent by the civilian side because of, resource allocation through budgetary, considerations. So, hey, we want to have everybody wearing this armor, and we have, these 5 districts that produce armor. So let's, go through the, requisition process and the development process to build better armor packages for guys to wear. And, it's a top-down approach. So we want to make sure that everybody's got the newest, best thing. Well, that's not what everybody needs. In a certain district or a certain, area, certain senator or representative has a company in his district that makes fucking body armor. He pushes a certain fucking agenda, and you end up with shitty crap. And it had nothing to do with talking to, if you're talking about Rick and you, right, as an example, you guys have to run DMRs, and you want better glass, right? Do they talk to you guys? No, it comes from higher. Hey, we can get so many thousands of, these units of glass from this company from fucking Germany for this price point. And it has this reticle, and it's a good deal for the DoD based on what the civilian government will give us for funds, as opposed to talking to you and Rick and saying, hey, what do your guys like as far as a reticle and why? Let's see who makes that optic with that reticle, because that's what we're trained on. That's what we're very, very, very good at, shooting fuckers in the face with this reticle. They do it backwards. It drives me fucking crazy. And I'm sure it drives you guys crazy.
No, it's like the Army plate carriers solicitation is an axe I like to grind, but they had thousands and thousands of pages of feedback on the 4 down selected systems. And inevitably it went to the one that was rated worst by all the people at the bottom level that tested these systems, in training.
I know all about that whole thing, man. It pissed me off.
Yeah. It was like, why are you even bothering spending all this additional money? Is it just because you have to? If you've already decided what this outcome is going to be, then because you're bound by law to specifically go through all this testing because you have to, just to basically, feed a, or check a box, then, what's the point?
Well, and that also comes down to leadership. I mean, you got guys, pretty much higher who have achieved their level of, rank. And it's more about, dealing with big projects and programs. They have a hard time going down to the guy that does the job and saying, hey, look, we're thinking about changing this, armor package. What are your thoughts on this? Well,
there's also an easy way to fix that, though. It's, make some of the testers, the people even at the mid-level of that whole system, make them participate in those grueling exercises and stuff like that in the same systems they're asking the lower enlisted guys to participate in, because they're going to see just as quickly that this doesn't work, or this sucks because of this.
Right. I mean, but I'm not going to get into all the details here, but I mean, I know a couple companies actually that are like, hey, we'll get our fucking, gear engineers and builders in the gear and take them out to the range and have them shoot so they can see how this doesn't work or why this does work, so that when they do their when the solicitation is called for and they, submit their product to evaluation, it's gone through a couple different mindsets and philosophies. Hey, this doesn't work because it binds up here, or this buckle fails if we go prone, or as a sniper, this doesn't work because of this, or, we're a dev group and, this carrier doesn't work because we're swimming. It's not just the fucking guys that use it. It's the fucking engineers. The engineers go, holy fuck, I didn't realize that was a pain in the ass. I had to fucking swim in that thing for fucking 8 hours last week. How can I make this better? Right. I mean, I know how that shit works. I'm pretty conversant with that, but you got guys, it's just like NTOA or TTPOA or, FLETC. And I'm not slamming necessarily, but when you get guys that make decisions based on budget and available information, they look at what they think are best practices. They're higher and they look at best practices or best, reports based on whatever, and make command decisions. Like, hey, Rick and Matt Meckley are going to wear this because this is what everybody says they should wear, as opposed to talking to Rick and his guys and you and your guys and saying, what works best for you? You're fucking, you're sitting on a fucking rooftop in fucking Fallujah and you're posted up on a corner of a fucking rooftop. What do you need? How can we make it better for you to be more lethal and more effective? As opposed to, this is what you get, fucking work around it. That's bullshit. It's a failure of leadership. Matt, anything else?
Nada from me.
I know you're getting tired, man.
Yep, I'm good. I've actually got stuff to do in the next 40 minutes or so. So
You just woke up.
Yes.
He's got work to do, man.
Yeah, my day is starting. Yours is probably well past ending.
No, I've got another 5 hours while I'm up.
Oh, joy.
Man, I told you I go to bed at fucking 5 and get up at noon.
Yeesh. I remember those. I remember that sleep schedule. That kind of sucks balls.
Yeah, I'm used to it now. So, Prime, did we cover everything you wanted to cover? I know we kind of got tangential here, but
Yes.
So basically, audience, If you reach a plateau, find something else to do, find work to do, find an alternative source of information or training.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, you can always go to primary and secondary. There are plenty of options in the groups and on the forum. We have a forum, right, Matt?
We have a forum.
You can always go that. You can always go there, and there's plenty of information out there. Lots of SMEs that you can avail yourself of to expand your horizons and empty your teacup.
It's true. I've been there. So, with that in mind, thanks for joining us. You can find us at primaryandsecondary.com. We have that forum at primaryandsecondary.com/forum. We are on YouTube. Subscribe, like, give us feedback, comment. We're also on iTunes. We have daily 10 to 20 minutes of information that we provide. Clips from these shows are released daily. There's a new clip every day. It takes a little bit of time to get it done, but it's worth it. And there's always good information in them, except when Meckley's on, especially his gunsmithing.
Yeah, right. Hey, I do my own stupid stuff with my own guns. I don't touch other people's.
Oh, we've seen. We have it on, recorded.
I know.
Yeah. One really cool thing about all this too is I went through all of our videos yesterday and just was reminded of how cool of a group of people we have. Professionals from military, law enforcement, gun industry, private citizen, competition. We have top-notch individuals. These guys are cream of the crop, trendsetters. These are the people to watch. What they do now are making waves for the future, and it's neat to be part of this. So I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully we'll do another one of these fairly soon. It was too long between the last one and this one. So we will talk to you soon.